Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Ashley Dale. On a summer night in 2022, an innocent woman fell victim in Liverpool's Old Swan district, just a few miles from the city centre. At 12:41 a.m. on August 21, 2022, police received a call from a neighbor reporting a violent situation taking place next door. When the police arrived, the house was eerily quiet, with the front door clearly broken open, suggesting that a violent incident had occurred. The back door leading to the garden was left ajar. As the police cautiously entered the garden, they discovered the body of a woman. Just a few meters away, her mobile phone appeared to have slipped from her hand in her final moments. They quickly understood the gravity of the situation when they found a number of spent bullet casings scattered around the house. While one officer was investigating the crime scene, other officers arrived, waking several neighbors with the noise. Neighbors reported hearing gunshots coming from the house, while others said they heard screeching tires and car alarms going off hours before the incident. The tragic event left everyone in the area shocked. Neighbors helped the police identify the victim as 28-year-old Ashley Dale. Ashley grew up in a close-knit family and was the oldest of 3 siblings. In 2015, her younger brother was mistakenly murdered by a gang at the age of 16. Ashley was deeply affected by the death of her younger brother, which changed her outlook on life. However, she persevered, using her grief as motivation to study and eventually earn a degree in environmental conservation. This achievement led to a fulfilling career as an environmental conservationist, where she thrived and earned the respect of her colleagues. They admired not only her dedication to her work but also her genuine compassion for those around her. In her role, Ashley focused on various projects to improve living conditions and public health in the city, establishing herself as a hardworking, intelligent, and goal-oriented person. In her personal life, Ashley Dale cherished time with her family, friends, and dog. Her loved ones described her as intelligent, kind, and caring. Despite her difficult past and the pain of losing a loved one, she moved forward with determination and succeeded in her path. However, things became more complicated when she started dating Lee Harrison, a man with deep ties to the criminal world. His connections to gangs caused serious concerns for Ashley's family, who feared for her safety. Although Ashley believed that Lee was gradually changing, she still trusted him. Lee Harrison, a 28-year-old man from Liverpool, was deeply involved with many gangs and banned substance trafficking. He was particularly close to Neil Bray, a local banned substance dealer. However, their friendship began to decline in 2018 due to issues related to banned substance and trust. That year, Neil was robbed of $50,000 worth of banned substance hidden in his home in an incident orchestrated by a rival gang. Neil suspected that Lee Harrison may have informed his rivals about the incident. Although Lee denied any wrongdoing, their relationship soured, turning them into enemies. In June 2022, Lee Harrison and Ashley Dale bumped into each other at the Glastonbury Festival, rekindling old feelings. However, they also encountered a member of Neil's gang, leading to a violent brawl due to their rivalry. Neil, who was at the festival, threatened to stab Lee the next time they encountered each other. The following day, police arrested Neil and his friends for his threatening behavior. Luckily for Neil, a friend of his took the blame when a knife was found next to Neil's passport, claiming it was his. The friend, James Witham, was later arrested on suspicion of carrying a weapon, but despite the police involvement, tensions remained high following the Glastonbury incident. Ashley's life changed dramatically after that. The encounter with the gang left her feeling paranoid and fearful. Over the following weeks, her concerns about physical threats from Neil Bray grew. Not only had he threatened them during the festival, but he had also warned that he would show up at their home address. This terrifying prospect had a profound effect on Ashley, and she confided in her best friend. She expressed her anxiety in a text message, saying she can't stop thinking that something is wrong. As her anxiety grew, Ashley reached out to several friends for support. In another message, she described how distressing the situation had become and how it was affecting her mental health. Despite her efforts to calm herself, Ashley couldn't shake the feeling that something worse was ahead. Unfortunately, her intuition was correct. On the evening of August 20th, 2022, Ashley posted a photo of herself relaxing on the couch, completely unaware of what would happen after dark. Then, her car alarm suddenly went off. It was her car, but she ignored it. Frustrated, she continued to enjoy the evening and texted a friend about the siren going off again, assuming it was because of the rain. The message seemed normal, but there was a paranoid undertone. That night, she sent another message saying, "She don't know, but it looks like someone is outside." Over time, Ashley's anxiety increased, and her car alarm went off again, reinforcing her belief that someone was outside and that something was seriously wrong. On the morning of August 21st, the doorbell rang, and Ashley sensed that it was bad news. The sound echoed through the quiet house, and suddenly, the door swung open, revealing an armed man standing in the doorway. He acted quickly, opening fire without giving her a chance to react. In a panic, Ashley grabbed her phone and ran out the back door. The attacker then moved throughout the house, shooting into several rooms in an attempt to find her, hoping she was hiding in the backyard. Ashley faced her final moments with extreme fear. She could not escape the violence or her fatal injuries, and the final text messages she sent just before the attack served as a haunting reminder of her awareness of the danger. Tragically, Ashley Dale was murdered, and many suspect that Lee Harrison's connection to gang activity contributed to her death. Police discovered that all of Ashley's tires had been slashed, likely due to the attacker's actions, which had set off her car alarm. Police believe this was a deliberate attempt to lure Ashley and Lee Harrison away from their home. When her family heard her last text message, they were devastated to realize that she had sensed something was seriously wrong. Fortunately, Ashley's text message contained vital information that would help solve her murder. Police now need to piece together the evidence. However, the investigation remains tense and complicated, especially because of her boyfriend, Lee Harrison. He happened to be absent during the shooting and was very unwilling to cooperate with the police, even refusing to testify. When he was brought in for questioning, he chose to remain silent, which hampered the investigation. He changed his mobile phone number and shunned Ashley's entire family, leaving them devastated. Lee's lack of empathy only increased concerns about his possible involvement in her death. Police were surprised to discover that shortly after Ashley's death, he had gone on holiday and left the country. This raised suspicions among the police, who wondered if he had done this to avoid prosecution. While he was on holiday, they focused on the events that took place on the night of August 20th, 2022. Surveillance camera footage showed them entering a store. After making a purchase, they left and got into a gray Hyundai i3. This car later became key evidence, as another surveillance camera recorded it near Ashley's home earlier that day. Surveillance camera footage captured a car approaching Ashley's home, showing the driver surveying the area before the attack that evening. James Witham and Joseph Piers approached Ashley's Volkswagen parked outside the family home and punctured the tires in order to set off the alarm. They attempted to lure Lee or Ashley out, but neither responded. Frustrated, they decided to retreat and come up with a new plan, which went badly wrong. An hour later, both men returned to Ashley's home, but this time one of them was armed, indicating their violent intentions. They broke into the house by forcing down the front door and saw Ashley running toward the back door. When she reached the garden door, James fired 8 shots from his pistol, hitting her in the back. After watching her fall, he went upstairs and fired 5 more shots into an empty bedroom, possibly as a threat. After a quick survey of the house and finding no one else inside, James quickly ran downstairs. Both James and Joseph then fled the scene. Fortunately, a neighbor's surveillance camera recorded the events that followed the attack. James and Joseph checked into a hotel in St. Helens to avoid detection. However, the police were able to track their movements and quickly located their car, leading to their arrest. Meanwhile, Neil Bray, who played a key role in organizing the attack, was spotted at a local golf club. Intelligence reports also indicated that he had been seen at a golf resort. The police worked together effectively to arrest him, and soon a fourth accomplice, Sean Zeiss, was arrested in connection with Ashley's murder. After the arrest and indictment of James Witham, Neil Bray, Sean Zeiss, and Joseph Pierce, the police gathered evidence, leading to the start of the trial. James Witham, who shot Ashley, initially claimed he did not intend to kill her. He argued that he intended to shoot her as a warning but accidentally hit her, asserting that her death was accidental. However, this defense was difficult to believe in court due to the overwhelming evidence, including previous threats, text messages, extensive surveillance camera footage, and numerous witness statements. When Ashley discovered that two armed men had broken into her home, she screamed in fear and tried to escape through the back door. James, who was armed, had time to aim. He fired 2 shots at Ashley, hitting her in the back as she tried to run away. It was clear that he had shot her intentionally. In November 2023, at Liverpool Crown Court, the judge sentenced James Witham, 41, Neil Bray, 26, Sean Zeiss, 28, and Joseph Pierce, 29, for murder, conspiracy to murder, and unlawful possession of a firearm. The 4 were sentenced to a total of 173 years in prison. James was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 43 years, Neil to life with the possibility of parole after 47 years, Joseph to life with the possibility of parole after 41 years, and Sean to life with the possibility of parole after 42 years. The sentencing of Ashley Dales for killers has left her family with mixed emotions. Although they feel that justice has been served, it can never replace the profound loss they have experienced. Ashley Dale's tragic death has left her family in a state of grief. Ashley's mother described the loss as life-changing. Adding to their grief, Ashley's younger brother was killed by the same gang. Her father lamented, "Ashley, the eldest of my 3 children, and my son are now both gone." Despite the loss, the family has become advocates against gang violence, working to unite the community and provide support through memorials for Ashley. Meanwhile, Ashley's boyfriend, Lee Harrison, has faced no consequences and remains at large. Even after his girlfriend was murdered, he continued to sell banned substance for profit. Gun violence in the UK is low, with one of the lowest gun-related homicide rates in the world. Despite a population increase since 2011, the average number of gun homicides in the UK remains at 29 per year. The level of gang violence in the UK has only increased in recent years, possibly due to poverty and lack of education. The situation in the gang world is not improving. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of James Patrick Bulger. John Venables was born on 13 August 1982 in Kirby, a town in the northeast of England, 10 kilometers from Liverpool. He has 2 older brothers. His parents often separated and reconciled, and his mother often shouted at him. At school, John was bullied, which led to him transferring to another school. At his new school, John befriended a boy named Robert Thompson. Robert was born on August 23, 1982, and came from a troubled family in Kirby. His father left when he was only 2 years old, leaving his mother to care for 7 children on her own. Afterward, she had another child with a new partner, but the departure of her husband deeply affected her. As a result, she struggled with depression and turned to heavy drinking. Robert often argued with his brothers, but had a special bond with his younger brother Ryan. Robert had a keen interest in collecting toy trolls. As John and Robert became friends, they discovered that they had similar interests. They often spent time together skipping school and shoplifting. On the morning of February 12, 1993, they met on the street. Instead of going to school, they hid their backpacks and went to the Trend Mall, which was known as one of the most dangerous areas in the city. That day, John and Robert stole batteries, construction paint, and a toy demon from the mall. As they talked, they came up with a disturbing idea. They said, "Let's find a child." It's unclear who first suggested it, but once they agreed, they followed through with the plan. Almost 3 years ago, on March 16, 1990, James Patrick Bulger was born. He was the only child of Denise Bulger and Ralph Stephen Bulger. They had lost a child during pregnancy in their 20s, so when James was born, they took great care of him. He was a smiling baby, and Denise made sure he was never far from her. On Friday, February 12, 1993, it was just over a month before James's 3rd birthday. Denise's brother, Nicole, invited her to the mall that day, and Denise agreed, taking James with her. They arrived at the mall that afternoon. First, they waited outside a clothing store while Denise tried on some clothes. For a brief moment, she lost sight of James, and when she quickly searched for him, she found him alone and crying. After leaving the clothing store, they went to the butcher's shop. Along the way, they stopped frequently because James wanted to play. At one store, James made a mess in the children's clothing section, and at another, he took some candy. When they arrived at the butcher shop, Denise thought it would be okay to leave James outside for a while. She believed that buying meat would be quick, and that he was tired from walking with her. However, buying meat took longer than she expected. When Denise finally got outside, she realized that she had lost track of her son again. She had just seen James playing with a cigarette butt, but then he disappeared from sight. This time, there was no crying to help her locate James. Meanwhile, while Denise was inside, Robert and John were wandering around the mall, looking for a child to kidnap. Their motive for doing so remains unknown. John and Robert then noticed little James, wearing a blue jacket and eating caramels by himself in front of the butcher shop. John walked up to James and said, "Come on, honey." James responded and walked over. John then took the boy's hand. Occasionally, James would run ahead of the boys, but they kept close to him the entire time. The three then left the mall. This happened at 3:42 p.m., just before Denise came out of the store and realized her son was missing. Denise quickly began searching for James in the security office, describing the boy and calling his name over the loudspeaker, but there was no response. A missing persons report was filed with the police only after they had checked all the stores in the mall. Meanwhile, the three children were walking near the mall. The Liverpool Canal runs alongside the mall, and the boys wandered along the banks of the canal, reaching a deserted area. There, John and Robert joked about pushing James into the water. They tried to bring the boy closer to the water's edge so he would slip, but James didn't fall. John then picked James up and threw him to the ground, causing him to hit his head on the ground and injure. The ground was covered in blood, and the two boys, Robert and John, decided to run away, leaving James behind. Just then, a woman passed by, saw James, and assumed he was with the older children. Worried that James or his injuries might reveal what had happened, Robert and John turned back to the boy. They called out to him again, and to their surprise, James got up and followed them. As they moved toward a busier street, several people saw the three boys, and some noticed the wound on James's forehead, but no one intervened. Their journey was long, stretching over 1.5 miles, and little James was exhausted. He cried and protested, but the kidnappers continued to drag him along. To keep him moving, They even fed him excessively. Along the way, James screamed for his mother repeatedly and attempted to escape, almost reaching a busy street, but the boys stopped him. Several passers-by noticed the situation and asked why the children were without their parents, but no one took action. Eventually, they arrived in a deserted area where Robert and John took turns carrying James up a hill before deciding to rest on some steps. An elderly woman, seeing James was red from crying and bruises, approached them and asked what was happening. The boys claimed they didn't know and said they had found him on the hill. Mistaking their intentions, the woman directed them to the nearest police station. However, the boys chose to head in the opposite direction. They had gone about 2 miles when they stopped at a store. 2 women approached John and Robert and discovered that James was the child who had gotten lost at the Strengths Mall. One of the women asked James if he was okay, but he remained silent. When she offered to take them to the police station, John confidently said that he knew the way, so they continued walking. They visited several stores and stopped to watch a fire along the way. Along the way, they encountered some children who asked about James. Robert told them that James was his brother, and they continued on. They walked along the railway tracks for at least 4 kilometers. Around 5:30 p.m., they reached a street in the city and played with James for a while. Although they were near the police station and Robert's house, they returned to the railway tracks. John and Robert's behavior changed. First, they tore off James's hood and threw it into the bushes. Then, they forced him to crawl through a hole in the fence onto the tracks. They poured stolen green paint on James, causing him to scream when the paint got into his left eye. John and Robert used everything around them to injure James, chasing him and throwing rocks and bricks at him, even hitting him on the head with a steel bar. They took off James's shoes, pants, and underwear, and they physically abused James. After torturing James, John and Robert placed James on the train tracks and covered him with bricks before leaving. James was bleeding and had multiple injuries all over his body. When the train arrived, he was dead. John and Robert then went to a video store before returning home, where John's mother Susan saw them through the window. After being reported missing by James's family, police began investigating the case and reviewed security footage from Strength Mall. The footage showed 2 older children taking James away, which surprised police, who had assumed the kidnappers were adults. It was confirmed that the suspects were around 12 years old. The following morning, the security footage was shared with the media. James's mother, Denise, spoke to the press alongside her husband Ralph, expressing her anguish over her son's situation and pleading for his safe return home. The investigation into the disappearance lasted 2 days, during which time several tips were received. On Saturday, February 13, a search of the water company turned up nothing. On Sunday afternoon, a railway worker discovered what he thought was a doll on the tracks. However, he was unaware of James's disappearance at the time, so he did not pay much attention to it. Later that day, 4 children discovered James's body. At first, they mistook it for a cat and then a doll torn in half, but they soon realized it was a human body. Police went to the railway to inspect the reported area. Half of James's body was covered with a coat. It appeared that James had been placed there. The boy's body was half off the tracks and half directly on the tracks. 42 injuries were found on James, mainly on his face and head. The boy suffered multiple fractures, and his body also had numerous cuts and bruises. An investigation revealed that James had lost a significant amount of blood. A shoe-like mark was found, and several wounds below the waist suggested that James had been sexually assaulted. It was determined that James had died when the train passed by, as the extent of his injuries made it impossible to determine a specific cause of death. James's underwear was covered in blood. Nearby, police discovered a 60-centimeter-long iron bar, along with several stones and bricks. In addition, 3 AA batteries and a can of blue paint were found near the body. Many neighbors from the Merseyside area came to the railway to pay their respects to the boy. Among them was Robert Thompson, who left a rose for James. John, on the other hand, did not come but was very interested in the story of James. One day John told his mother, "If I see those boys, I will kick them in the head." John's parents did not suspect John, although they saw some blue paint on his sleeves and he was wearing the same jacket seen in the surveillance camera footage. The community became confused. Some parents even began to worry about their children. Police reviewed school absentee lists and interviewed 60 children. A 12-year-old student was arrested, although he had not been charged with any crime. In response, neighbors vandalized his home by smashing windows. Police realized they were looking for older children than the actual suspects when they reviewed new footage from a parking lot camera. The video showed 2 boys walking with a baby, suggesting the kidnappers were likely under the age of 12. On the 4th day after the incident, a police officer from a nearby station contacted police. She reported that during a family gathering on Friday night, she noticed a dirty boy with paint on his clothes who had skipped school that day with a friend. The boy was identified as John Venables, aged approximately 10. Police then contacted John's school principal, who confirmed that John and his friend Robert had not attended school that day. 4 police officers arrived at Robert's house. When Robert saw the police, he began to cry. They had a search warrant and took some of his clothes. The officers immediately noticed blood on his shoes. Robert Thompson was arrested and taken to the police station for questioning. His mother was shocked when the police came to their house at 8 a.m. She even pointed out that there were traces of blue paint on her son's coat. When the police arrived at John's house, he, crying, said, "I didn't kill James." John was then taken into custody. At first, the police did not suspect either boy. They found it hard to believe that 2 children could commit such a crime. The 2 boys were taken into custody separately, and the police took fingerprints and blood samples from John and Robert's hair and fingernails. Police visited a store in the Strength Shopping Center after the owner reported seeing 2 boys standing in front of the window and touching items on Friday. Fingerprints belonging to Robert Thompson and John Venables were found on the glass. That same evening, Robert was questioned in the presence of his mother and lawyer. He was asked if he understood the difference between truth and lies, to which he responded that he did. When it was confirmed that he was at the shopping center, he attempted to deflect suspicion by saying he saw James that day, but claimed he was with someone else. John, who was familiar with Robert, denied any involvement in the kidnapping. Police noted that while Robert tried to shift blame onto John, he also denied his own involvement, stating he was with John but was not present during James's abduction. Robert pretended to cry when the police detected him lying, but the tears weren't real. The story began to unravel gradually. Initially, Robert stated that he saw John take the baby by the hand. However, the next morning, he admitted he had gone to the railroad with them. When the police brought up the stolen batteries, Robert felt ashamed. His mother encouraged him to be honest, and he confessed that he witnessed James being attacked with a brick. He insisted that he didn't participate in the violence. John was the only one responsible. Robert did acknowledge that he placed a brick on James's face while he was lying on the railway, supposedly to stop the bleeding, when the police questioned John. The questioning was difficult and had to be stopped frequently because John became very angry. John accused Robert of being a bad influence. At first, he denied being at the mall with Robert, but when he learned that Robert had confessed to being there, he admitted it. John struggled to keep his lie for a long time. Finally, after being repeatedly interrogated, he confessed that he had not only been at the mall, but had also killed James. But John claimed that he had been influenced by Robert. John recounted the events, starting with a walk around town and ending at the railroad. According to John, it was Robert who picked up James and threw him to the ground near the riverbank. John also claimed that Robert was responsible for the most horrific actions at the railroad. John was very cautious when the police brought up the batteries. He claimed to have no knowledge of Robert's involvement with the batteries. After a brief interrogation, John began to hit his father, who was sitting next to him, shocking the police. They now had enough evidence to charge John and Robert with the kidnapping and murder of James Bulger. Charges were filed on Saturday, February 20. James Bulger's funeral took place on March 1, 1993 in Kirby, with hundreds of people in attendance. During the investigation and trial, John and Robert denied all charges related to the case. The trial began in mid-May, and they were arraigned in adult court on November 1. Protests broke out outside the courthouse, leading to clashes with police. The murder of James Patrick Bulger by John Venables and Robert Thompson has caused outrage in the community. Evidence includes surveillance footage, paint and bloodstains on the two boys' clothing. A total of 38 witnesses have confirmed seeing the three children together on February 12. Many of these witnesses have been charged, as they lived in the area and did not intervene. Many believe they should have acted at the time to rescue James. Psychological evaluations of John and Robert have shown no mental disorders that would classify them as insane. John has unusual memories, including fantasies of rescuing James and returning him to his mother. Robert's psychiatrist has diagnosed him with symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. The prosecution insisted that both boys understood the seriousness of their actions, although the defense claimed that they had no previous history of violence. On 24 November, the verdict was announced in front of Dennis Bulger. John Venables and Robert Thompson were found guilty. Robert remained silent while John wept as the verdict was read. They were sentenced to indefinite detention and held in separate facilities under false identities. The case remains controversial. In 1999, the European Court of Human Rights ruled that John and Robert's right to a fair trial was not protected, as the trial took place in an adult court. In 2001, after 8 years in prison, they were given suspended sentences and released early, also under false identities. Robert Thompson has lived a relatively peaceful life since his release, while John, who is in Nablus, has chosen a more dangerous path. In 2010, John was incarcerated for child abuse and violating his parole. After the death of her son, Denise remarried and had 3 children. Ralph Bulger also remarried and had 3 daughters with his new wife. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Amanda Collie and Lindy Dobbins. On the morning of August 27, 2015, 36-year-old Amanda Collie returned home to find her house in chaos. Someone had broken into her while she was away. Her house was in disarray, with boxes knocked over, trash cans emptied, and many items broken or damaged, with glass strewn everywhere. Amanda panicked and checked her phone, which had many missed calls and messages from her ex-husband that she didn't want to reply to. At 5:30 a.m., she called her boyfriend and the police for help. She had recently started dating a man named Lamar. At that time, Lamar was driving his pickup truck down a route that led to her house. Meanwhile, the police were on their way to the scene. One officer arrived to assess the danger of the situation. He was to talk to Amanda and assess the damage to her property. The police assessed the situation and left after Amanda chose not to file a formal complaint. Before the police left her home around 9 a.m. that morning, someone came to Amanda's aid. The first person to visit was Lindy Dobbins, Amanda's best friend. At 39 and a mother of 3, Lindy had taken the morning off work to be with Amanda and support her. Lindy was a kind person who always helped others in difficult situations. After a while, their mutual friend Rachel Hendricks joined them. She had dropped her kids off at school and decided to support Amanda since she had some free time. By this time, Lamar was already at Amanda's house. The four of them gathered at Amanda's house, watching the chaos and discussing what had happened while considering their next steps. Amanda was still in shock from the incident and realized that she needed to consult a lawyer before reporting her ex-husband, who she believed was responsible. Eventually, Amanda's ex-husband called her again. This time, she chose to answer, leading to a 14-minute conversation. While they were in the living room, they suddenly heard the sound of shattering glass. A few minutes later, a police officer stopped Lamar on the street. He was running frantically, not paying attention to where he was going, trying to escape Amanda's house. According to him, he left the living room as soon as the shooting started, went down to the laundry room, and then fled through the garage, which was partially open. Lamar reported that unexpectedly, gunfire erupted at Amanda's house. He informed the police officer that he thought the shots were fired from outside the house. He did not observe anyone inside being hit by bullets. He was unable to give the police specific details. Lamar is certain that the attacker is targeting him, leading him to believe that the women inside the house are alive. The situation was dire. Minutes after Lamar left the house, the other women tried to escape. Rachel ran through the living room and through the broken glass front door. She spotted the neighbor's house next door and quickly ran over to hide. After escaping, Rachel called 911 to report that she had escaped but had injured her arm. She suspected that an armed attack had occurred at her friend's house and knew exactly who was likely responsible. Realizing the danger, Rachel instinctively ran away when Lamar told them to hide. She was shocked when the gunfire continued. While speaking to the police, Rachel expressed her concern for her friends and urged the police to come quickly to save them. In the next few minutes, 2 more calls came into the police station, one from Amanda and one from her friend Lindy. However, during the calls, they only screamed while the gunshots echoed in the background. The police immediately went to Amanda Collie's house to rescue her. Gunshot wounds to Lindy's arms and legs showed that she was trying to defend herself from her attacker. Unfortunately, her efforts were futile. The attacker had fired a full magazine at her, indicating a clear intention to kill. Lindy was discovered at the end of a long corridor, lying in a pool of blood. It seems she tried to escape, but was killed before she could get away. Rachel stated that just a few seconds before the shooting started, she looked toward the backyard of the house. There, along the garden path, she saw the outline of a man who then pulled out a weapon through the glass door. A group of people stood behind him. The glass was quite thin, preventing her from seeing exactly who was there. The police corroborated her account by analyzing the locations of the bullet holes in the backyard. On the path, they found several unused cartridges, which were identified as deli caliber bullets. Lamar went back to Amanda's house. When the police arrived, he felt assured that they would have the situation under control. Lamar mentioned that he heard gunshots coming from the backyard and believed that he was the perpetrator's target. At that moment, he urged everyone to run. Although he did not see the perpetrator, he suspected that the perpetrator was Amanda's ex-husband, who had spoken to her on the phone just minutes before the attack. Rachel explained that they didn't have enough time to react as quickly as Lamar, so she and Lindy decided to hide in the pantry. She heard Amanda on the other side, probably trying to find a place to hide and possibly running to the bathroom. Seconds later, Rachel heard the front door being broken down. At that moment, the intruder entered the house. He approached the pantry, tried to open the door, and found that it was locked from the inside. The attacker wanted to know where Amanda's boyfriend was. Rachel and Lindy replied that he wasn't there while continuing to hold the door. The intruder then fired through the door, hitting Rachel's arm, causing her to lose her balance. Linda's leg was now injured, causing her to scream in pain. Amanda was also injured but still alive and screaming near the bathroom. In that brief moment, Rachel jumped up and ran from the house. According to Rachel, the attacker could have been Amanda's ex-husband, James Terry Collie. She recognized his familiar voice behind the door. A few minutes later, James's father called the police to report that his son had just confessed to him that he had caught his wife with a friend. At that point, the police arrived at the house. After the attack, James fled the scene. K-9 units were deployed to locate James. They followed James's scent to a nearby street. During the search, a cell phone was found, which was likely left behind by James. Unfortunately, the police were unable to identify the vehicle in which he drove away. He had disappeared from the scene of the crime. The area was searched with specially trained dogs and helicopters, but these efforts yielded no results. Despite an extensive search that lasted several hours, James remained at large, posing a threat to public safety. Fortunately, police arrested James later that evening while he was driving his sister's car. During a search of the car, police discovered a shotgun and 2 Delroy and PGO caliber handguns in the passenger seat, along with a large amount of ammunition. A subsequent examination of the gun confirmed that the bullets matched those found at the crime scene and in Amanda and Lindy's bodies. In addition, glass fragments identical to those found in Amanda's home were discovered. After his arrest, James refused to cooperate with the investigation, claiming that he could not recall anything from the time of the tragic events. Further investigation revealed that James and Amanda had been married for over 8 years and had 2 children. Their relationship then began to deteriorate, leading to their divorce. James moved to his sister's house, 20 km away from their family home, where Amanda and the children continued to live. As the divorce proceedings progressed over the following months, they encountered many difficulties regarding child custody and property division. The two then decided to start new chapters in their lives. James began dating a co-worker named Emmy, while Amanda pursued a relationship with Lamar, another co-worker from the sporting goods company. Even though the couple's relationship had completely broken down, James was still possessive of his ex-wife Amanda. He suspected that she was seeing someone new and called her several times to find out who it was. Amanda did not share the truth because she feared it would lead to serious problems. As a result, James became increasingly angry and aggressive. He called her frequently, becoming so intrusive that Amanda felt compelled to go to court to get a restraining order to protect herself. The weekend before the attack, Amanda's neighbor and close friend took a photo of a man mowing the lawn in front of Amanda's house. The man was identified as her new boyfriend, Lamar. When James found out, he tried to contact Amanda, insulting her and demanding to know who she was seeing. Amanda lied, claiming that the man in the photo was just a landscaper. James was going crazy because Amanda had found someone new. Early on the morning of August 27, he planned a terrible act. Surveillance cameras from nearby homes did not capture the moment James, her ex-husband, entered Amanda's house. This was not surprising, since he had lived there for a long time and was familiar with the areas not covered by the cameras. He approached the house undetected from the backyard, just as he had intended. The James entered the house around 3 a.m., but found it empty. Frustrated, he started to create chaos, throwing items around and dumping trash from the kitchen bins. He broke the TV and damaged several costly appliances. This destruction seemed aimed at upsetting Amanda. As he caused this damage, he was also getting ready for the terrible actions that were to come. James was looking for evidence that Amanda was having an affair with another man. Eventually, he discovered something that confirmed his suspicions and made him even angrier. At 4:00 a.m., he went to Mike's house, who lived across the street. James knocked loudly, shouted and swore, while discussing Amanda in an angry tone. Mike showed James everything he had found in Amanda's house, including some intimate toys that James had never seen before with his ex-wife. Mike knew that James had been given a restraining order prohibiting him from having access to his home or his ex-wife. However, James had violated the order. This could have resulted in a court hearing and possible arrest. Mike tried to calm James down by offering him a drink and suggesting that he go home and rest to avoid making any more impulsive decisions. Unfortunately, James ignored this advice and decided to go to court to resolve the issues related to his first restraining order violation. On the way, he called his father to tell him about the damage he had done to Amanda's home. His father reprimanded him and urged him not to be stupid again. James was arrested and charged with 2 counts of premeditated murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, robbery, and aggravated stalking for violating a court order. James maintained his innocence, claiming amnesia, and was taken to the county jail to await a hearing. The prosecution needed to prove that James attacked Amanda, her friends, and Lamar. Although there was no direct evidence linking him to the crimes, there were multiple witnesses present who confirmed that he was the perpetrator. Police pieced together James's movements on the day of the attack. James arrived at Mike's house around 4:00 a.m. and stayed with Mike until 4:45 a.m. After leaving, James went to his sister's house, where he lived with his sister and father, about 15 minutes from James's old home. After returning to his sister's house, he retrieved a gun and ammunition before committing the crime. Prosecutors allege that the motive for the attack was a photo he had taken of Lamar at Amanda's house. Police searched James's cell phone and computer. They learned that at approximately 5:00 a.m., he began texting Amanda. He had tried to call her just 1 minute before the first gunshots and had called Amanda 22 times before that. Up until that point, Amanda had tried to avoid answering his calls, but after seeing the state of her house, she decided to pick up the phone. During the call, she accused James of robbing and vandalizing her house. Amanda had asked James to leave her alone. It was clear that she had done everything she could to avoid contact with James. She even suggested that she would keep quiet about his vandalizing her house if he would finally leave her life. The defense team is determined to fight the charges. They argue that James was prescribed medication to treat anxiety and depression, which was supposed to help him but when taken together caused unpredictable side effects. This reaction was made worse the night before the attack, especially after he had consumed beer and strong drinks. On the evening of August 26, after returning home, he took another medication that was supposed to help him sleep. He fell asleep but woke up a few hours later. The defense argued that the combination of the drugs he had taken and the alcohol had contributed to his uncontrollable behavior. However, James had plenty of time before the incident. The effects of these substances should have diminished, and he even attended the trial that morning without arousing any suspicion. After leaving the courthouse, he began calling and texting Amanda. Before arriving at his wife's house, he filled up his car with gas. The prosecutor's office believes this is a sign that he was preparing to flee the state, suggesting that he had planned ahead. During a search of the car, police found a shotgun, 2 handguns, and a large amount of ammunition of various calibers. These items were scattered throughout the vehicle, indicating that they had been hastily discarded. Police also found the same drugs that the defense had mentioned. The attorneys prepared expert witnesses in pharmacology and psychiatry to demonstrate that the combination of drugs James was taking could impair his ability to think rationally and make decisions. According to the attorneys, this impairment ruled out premeditated culpability, suggesting that James's actions could have been a spontaneous outburst of aggression beyond his control. The pharmacologist stated that the combination of these drugs was likely to cause amnesia. Therefore, James may not actually remember the incident. During police questioning, Mike provided detailed evidence of James coming to his house that morning. James was a bit strange. Mike knew that James was trying to cope with Amanda's new relationship after their divorce. Mike could not understand why James still wanted to possess her even though they were divorced. James became obsessed and sent pictures of Amanda's new boyfriend to her, which led to a tragic outcome. Police carefully examined text messages exchanged between James and Mike. It appeared that Mike was telling the truth. James harbored resentment not only toward his ex-wife, but also toward her friends. He specifically blamed Amanda's best friend, Lindy, for turning Amanda against him, which fueled his hatred for her. Evidence showed that James had collected a weapon just before leaving the house, the prosecutor's office said. Police also noted that James' father had tried to intervene and stop him from doing so, but his efforts were unsuccessful. The key witness for the defense was James's sister, Rhonda, who lived with him at the time. However, she was on vacation in Italy during the attack and returned 2 weeks later. Rhonda disputed the prosecutor's assertion that James was planning the attack. She believed that the 2 guns found in the car were there by chance, as she had been carrying them for a while. The defense argued that this indicated the attack was impulsive and unintentional. In contrast, the prosecution thought Rhonda was merely trying to defend younger brother, with whom she had always had a close relationship. The prosecution pointed out inconsistencies in Rhonda's testimony, especially regarding the type of handgun she reported having in the car. This raised the jury's suspicions. James faced the possibility of the death penalty for the assault. James's defense team aimed to reduce the severity of the sentence. The only sure way to spare James's life was to contest the premeditated murder charges, which could have carried a sentence of life in prison without parole. However, the prosecution was determined not to negotiate and refused to offer a plea deal. They argued that James, who had taken 2 lives and seriously injured 2 others, deserved the death penalty. The defense argued that James had no intention of harming Amanda or her friends. However, when he arrived at Amanda's home, an incident occurred that angered him. It is believed that there was an argument between the men, which may have caused James to start shooting. However, surviving witnesses, Rachel and Lamar, claimed that no conversation occurred and that no one provoked him. On the other hand, the prosecution argued strongly that James did not arrive at the home by accident. Instead, he returned to his sister's home to get weapons and ammunition for the murder, suggesting that his actions were premeditated. The key piece of evidence in the case was a phone call between James and Amanda that took place shortly before the shooting began. This call was played to the jury in court and lasted 14 minutes. During the conversation, Amanda attempted to end her relationship with James. She cried and begged him, trying to intimidate him by mentioning the restraining order and threatening to call the police if he continued to stalk her. It was clear that she had been enduring his harassment for a long time, but he paid no attention to her suffering. After both sides presented their arguments, the jury began deliberating their verdict. 2 hours later, they reached a unanimous decision, finding James Terry Collie, 38, guilty on all 7 counts, including burglary. However, the case was not over. 2 weeks later, the same jury reconvened to decide whether James should receive the death penalty. The defense team remained hopeful. They wanted to prove that the combination of drugs he had been taking could have caused side effects, such as memory loss. Experts, including a forensic psychiatrist and a pharmacist, supported this claim, arguing that James suffered from parasomnias, which meant he could not have been aware and could not remember the events that had occurred. Psychiatrists claim that people with parasomnias can walk, drive, and perform deliberate actions. However, the prosecutor's office has disputed these claims by presenting court records showing that James had been in court the morning before the attack. He had interacted with several people and there was no unusual behavior. James appeared calm, with no signs of slowing down, confusion, or depression, common signs of people with parasomnias. The prosecution successfully convinced the jury of James's guilt for causing the deaths of Amanda and Lindy. The jury unanimously decided that he should receive the death penalty. A third hearing then took place, where the court gave the defense one last chance to present any compelling evidence that might lead to a reduction in the death sentence. During this hearing, James took the stand for himself for the first time, describing the incident as a terrible accident. However, his argument lacked credibility. The defense attorneys also failed to present any substantial evidence, leading to James Terry Collie's death sentence being upheld. He is currently in prison, awaiting execution by lethal injection. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case, the case of Marlene Oakes. Marlene was born in December 1954 to her parents Lorraine and Billy. At the age of 16, she married a much older man, Bill Major, who was 26 at the time. Despite the large age difference, they quickly got along. The same year they got married, they welcomed their first son, Donald. 4 years later, they had a daughter named Lalana. The family lived in Verona, a small town in the suburbs of Kentucky, USA. Verona is located near downtown Cincinnati. Bill worked as an auto mechanic, and according to Marlene's father, he was ambitious and had a great ability to persuade others. This gave him a big advantage in his job. His auto repair shop was located near the interstate. A convenient location helps him always have many customers. At that time, Marlene was a housewife, taking care of the children, while Bill was the main breadwinner for the family. However, their marriage was not a happy one. They argued frequently, and Bill often abused his wife. One day, a man named Glenn St. Hilaire arrived in town and quickly befriended Bill. He began working at Bill's shop, handling a variety of tasks. Originally from Canada, Glenn owned welding equipment and had extensive knowledge of cars, thus becoming a valuable assistant to Bill. He lives in a trailer near Bill's house, and eventually, he and Marlene developed feelings for each other. After that, they had an affair with each other. Bill was always at work, which gave Glenn and Marlene the freedom to meet. Marlene felt drawn to Glenn, who was younger, calmer, and made her feel at ease. By October 1980, Marlene was 25 years old, while Bill was 35. He frequently resorted to violence against her, keeping the entire family in a state of fear. In this stressful situation, it is not surprising that she sought comfort from Glenn. At the time, Donald was 8 years old and Lalana was 4. Strangely, Bill not only tolerated her relationship with Glenn, but even encouraged it. Those close to the family were aware of the situation and found it shocking. However, events soon took a tragic turn. On the afternoon of October 11, 1980, Bill and Marlene had a big argument in their backyard, and the neighbors could hear it clearly. Later that evening, Bill took his children, Donald and Lalana, to a neighbor's house, asking them to care for the kids for a day due to serious family issues. He told the neighbors that Marlene had run off with Glenn and that he needed time to process everything. The neighbors, however, knew that he was enraged over Marlene's relationship with Glenn. He beat her and the children because of it, and her car was missing. However, no matter Bill's explanation, no one could believe that Marlene, a mother who is wholeheartedly devoted to her children, can leave her children. Afterward, Bill contacted the police and repeated the same story he had shared with the neighbors. However, the details didn't quite add up. Marlene's friends insisted that she deeply loved her children and would never abandon them. They also revealed that she was angry at he because of his abusive behavior. She confided in them that Bill had threatened to kill her if she left him to live with Glenn. A close friend of his even heard him describe in detail how he would kill her if she defied him. He had talked about dismembering her body and hiding the remains so thoroughly that they would never be found. Glenn, Marlene's lover, once heard Bill confess that he would attack her, decapitate her, and destroy her teeth so that the police could not identify her through dental records. Marlene began to fear that her plan to move in with Glenn could put her life in serious danger. In her diary, she wrote that Bill would only agree to sign divorce papers if she promised not to report his abuse of her and the children to the authorities. She was in a difficult position, not knowing what to do. She was exhausted by the toxic relationship and wanted to escape her controlling husband, but she was terrified of the fallout. Despite this, the police launched an investigation into her disappearance. She was officially declared a missing person. She was described as a petite woman with blonde hair and glasses. At the time she went missing, she had been wearing jeans and a blue-green checkered shirt. Her car was also reported missing. On October 11, 1980, Marlene called her sister to talk about the problems in her marriage. She was looking for advice, but her sister didn't know how to help. She said she planned to file for divorce and fight for full custody of her children. She also shared another reason for her decision. Bill had been harassing their 8-year-old son, Donald. She felt very scared and could not bear it. She warned Bill to never touch the children again and threatened to kill him if he did. This made him furious. Marlene confided to her sister that she had evidence of Bill's abuse of Donald and had hidden it in a safe place where he could not find it. She assured her that if anything happened to her, the evidence would be turned over to the police. Later that day, she called her sister again, but this time she sounded very distressed. She had just had another argument with Bill. Marlene then gave Glenn her diary, which contained all the important incident. She told him that if she ever went missing, detectives could find answers in the pages of her diary. She also told her sister the same thing during their phone call. That was the last time her family ever heard from her. On the night of October 11, Glenn arrived at Bill's house after midnight and found the area around the trailer in disarray. Around 3 a.m., he encountered Bill and asked about Marlene. Bill claimed that Marlene had run away. However, he found this hard to believe. He had recently seen she, and she had no intention of leaving her kids behind. He knew she was a mother who was always devoted to her children, so she would never abandon them. It soon became clear to everyone that Bill was lying. During this time, the children had actually been staying with neighbors. He was the one who brought them there and told them that Marlene had run away with a lover. His story was riddled with contradictions, and he kept changing his account. Then, when Bill arrived at his neighbor's house, he even handed over all of his weapons to them to take care of the children, including a 9mm handgun and a .22 caliber rifle. He also sold his tractor to another neighbor, explaining that he was moving to live closer to his parents. A few days after Marlene's disappearance, Bill went to the police station to report the incident. He said that after an argument at home, she had left, and he was convinced that she had run away with her lover. Following this, Glenn also contacted the police and provided information about the conflicts in the relationship between Marlene and Bill. He handed over to the police everything related to Marlene, including the diaries she had left with him. These diaries contained clues that were detrimental to Bill. Glenn also recounted Bill's unusual behavior after Marlene's disappearance. According to him, Bill's transfer of weapons to neighbors and the sale of valuable assets were very suspicious. This showed that Bill seemed to be planning to run away. He believed that Bill was involved in Marlene's disappearance. After speaking with Glenn, the police began investigating Marlene's case more thoroughly. They believed that she did not simply run away from her husband, Bill, but that the matter may be more serious. It is very likely that one of the two men, Bill or Glenn, was involved in this disappearance. Bill and Glenn were both considered prime suspects in the case. However, both denied any involvement. Glenn was cooperative and willingly shared all the information he had with the police. Bill, on the other hand, gave conflicting testimony and behaved strangely during a polygraph test, makes him more suspicious. At this time, the police reviewed Marlene's diary, which details the motive for the crime and even hints at what Bill may have done to her, However, there was still not enough evidence to charge Bill with murder. No evidence or trace of the incident was found in the trailer, the area surrounding the vehicle, or at the auto repair shop. The police spoke to Marlene's children, Donald and Lalana. They paid particular attention to 8-year-old Donald, hoping he might be able to provide some information, especially considering the contents of Marlene's diary. However, the boy was too frightened, making it extremely difficult to gather any information from him. Lalana was not questioned at all because she was too young, although Donald did not reveal anything useful, but Bill violently beat him after learning about the police interviews. Around the same time, he also began abusing his 4-year-old daughter, Lalana, treating her cruelly. He often took the children to his workplace, where he continued to abuse them. The police also questioned Marlene's sister, who firmly rejected the idea that Marlene would abandon her family and children to be with her lover. According to her sister, she had planned to divorce Bill amicably, gain custody of the children, and then start a new life with Glenn. She has no intention of running away to avoid her problems. At that time, it was known that Marlene had disappeared with the car without taking any personal belongings. But even assuming that she had run away, why would she leave all her important belongings at home, including her wallet, driver's license, money, and jewelry? Furthermore, she did not bring the medications that her doctor had just prescribed. This medication was essential for her, making it unlikely she would leave without it. All of these details did not fit the theory that she had left on her own. Despite extensive investigation, no clues were found. Investigators continued questioning everyone who knew the family. During a conversation with the police, Bill admitted he no longer believed Marlene was alive, which raised suspicions. He also began agreeing with her sister and Glenn that it was unlikely she would have abandoned all her belongings and disappeared without leaving any message. After Marlene disappears, Bill begins to tell Donald and Lalana the whole truth about her relationship, detailing her encounters with her lover, Glenn. He seemed intent on turning the children against their mother. He accused her of drug use, abusing alcohol, and even selling her body. He claimed she had left because she didn't love them anymore. Donald and Lalana grew up thinking that their mother, Marlene, was a troubled person and had abandoned them. This left a deep wound in their souls. They could not understand why she abandoned them. They had no choice but to stay with their father, Bill, who raised them harshly. Lalana later recalled that after her mother's disappearance, Bill became a tyrant. He frequently subjected she and Donald to physical and emotional abuse. On one occasion, he hit Donald so severely that the boy couldn't walk for several days. While the police were still investigating, Bill decided to sell all of his assets, including his home and auto repair shop. He then moved with his children to East Providence, Rhode Island, to be closer to his parents. There, he bought a trailer and stabilized life. The decision to move into a trailer was unusual. Bill gave up a comfortable lifestyle and a successful store in exchange for much more difficult living circumstances. His new home was considered unfavorable and not the best place to raise young children. A year after Marlene's disappearance, he remarried. His new wife was named Pauline. For a long time, they lived together but could not officially marry, because Bill could not legally end his marriage with Marlene. Eventually, he managed to file for divorce and married Pauline. Meanwhile, Glenn stayed in Verona. He found work at a local factory and was one of the few people, along with Marlene's family, who continued to search for answers about her disappearance. He frequently visited the police station to check on the investigation. The police were not only searching for Marlene but also for her car, yet no leads were found. They sent her dental records and other information to nearby cities and states, hoping for a breakthrough. Although the search is still ongoing, there is no sign that Marlene is dead. Police speculate that she have wanted to leave her current life behind to start anew somewhere else. On November 29, 1981, a hunter discovered a partial skull in the woods, a few miles from the old trailer park where Bill's family had lived. The bone was heavily damaged and showed marks from the object that had severed it from the body. For many years, the police were unable to identify the victim. All they could determine was that the bone belonged to a white woman, under 30 years old. There were signs of dismemberment, and the cause of death was determined to be multiple gunshot. As the years passed, Bill continued to live with Pauline, but his treatment of Donald and Lalana became increasingly cruel. At one point, Lalana became so desperate that she confided in her stepmother Pauline, telling her about the abuse. She revealed that Bill had molested Donald and then raped her, threatening to kill them if they spoke out. Pauline was furious when she learned the truth and could not keep quiet. She confronted Bill, warning him that if he did it again, she would call the police. For a while, Bill promised to control himself. By 1985, Bill and Pauline had a child together. By this time, Marlene had been missing for 13 years. Lalana once again confides in Pauline about Bill's harassment. This time, Pauline reported the incident to the police. Bill was arrested, and his children, Donald and Lalana, admitted that they had prayed that he would not return home. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison for his crimes. After his release, he lost interest in his family. Pauline ended their relationship immediately after his arrest, but she refused to take care of his children, Donald and Lalana. Eventually, they went to live with their maternal grandmother, that is, Marlene's mother. At this point, Lalana asked her grandmother why her mother abandoned her and Donald. The grandmother replied that Marlene abandoned the children only because Bill killed Marlene. She firmly believed he was involved in Marlene's disappearance, though there was no concrete evidence to prove it. After his release from prison, Bill began a relationship with a woman named KLR. He concealed his dark past from her, claiming he had been imprisoned for armed robbery. He did not want her to know about the abuse he had inflicted on his children. The two married and lived happily for a while. However, in 1995, Bill suffered a stroke and became confined to a wheelchair. By then, Lalana was an adult and capable of handling matters on her own. She decided to look into the disappearance of her mother, Marlene. The first step she took was buying a notebook to document all the clues. She then approached Bill and pleaded with him to disclose the location of her mother's remains so that she could provide her with a proper burial. Lalana even promised him that if he told her the truth, she won't report to the police. However, Bill outright refused and told her that if she thought he would reveal where he hid her mother's body, she was crazy. Despite her attempts to persuade him, he remained uncooperative. Understanding that Bill would not help, Lalana launched her own investigation. She began speaking with relatives, close friends, and acquaintances who might have information about her mother, Marlene. During her search, she learned that her mother had kept a diary where she documented significant events in her life. She also discovered that the police had confiscated the diary as evidence back in 1980. She managed to obtain permission to review her mother's case file, including the diary entries. What she read left her deeply shocked. Marlene's diary revealed that she was aware of Bill's abuse of their son, Donald. She also discovered that Bill had been convicted in 1975 for molesting 2 young boys. After learning this, she wrote that all her feelings for her husband, Bill, had vanished. She demanded that he never touch their child again. The diary detailed Bill's erratic behavior and threats, including his frequent boasts about knowing how to commit the perfect crime. He claimed that to avoid identification, one would need to remove all the victim's teeth. Marlene also expressed her plans to file for divorce and seek full custody of her children. In one of her final diary entries, Marlene wrote that she had threatened Bill with divorce, cut off contact between him and his children. He did not want that to happen, but not out of love for them. In 2000, Leona contacted the police and shared the information from Marlene's diaries. This prompted the police to re-examine the diaries and immediately question Bill and Donald. Donald provided detailed accounts of Bill's cruelty. Leona also learned that, sometime after Marlene's disappearance, a skull had been discovered in a forested area near their old house. She located the exact spot and visited it herself, hoping to uncover more evidence, but her search was unsuccessful. The police had an important piece of evidence, a skull that had no teeth, which matched what Bill had said about the perfect crime. At the time, identification of remains relied heavily on dental records, as modern identification technology was not available. When experts tried traditional DNA testing, they discovered severe bone damage, making analysis impossible. So they turned to newer technology, specifically mitochondrial DNA analysis. However, the county refused to pay the $120 cost of the study, as it was not certain that it would help the case. Leona had to raise money to pay for the procedure. For this, she organized a small fund. At that time, such research was conducted only in one laboratory in the United States. The amount of money needed to be raised was huge, but her family were enthusiastic in supporting her. For example, her family members contributed their entire savings to cover the cost of the analysis. Finally, she earned enough money. County forensic experts took DNA samples from Donald and Leona to compare with the DNA from the skull that was found. The results showed that the skull did indeed belong to Marlene, who had been missing. This confirmed the suspicions of her children and relatives that she had been murdered. Bill learned about the discovery of the skull. Bill's father called the police to report that his son had killed Marlene. According to his account, Bill had attacked her, then dismembered her body and scattered the body parts far apart. To prevent identification, Bill destroyed the upper and lower jaws. Bill also submerged her car in the river, and he also informed the authorities of its location. When they tried to recover the car, they encountered many difficulties due to the strong river currents, which may have pushed the car far from its original location. They tried draining the river and used experienced divers, but the search was complicated. Investigators decided to enlist Bill's father's help in gathering more evidence against Bill. They instructed him to call Bill, get a confession during the conversation, and record it. To unnerve Bill, they tell Bill about an investigation initiated by Leona. Upon hearing that his daughter was looking for Marlene, Bill became enraged and told her to stop looking and forget about her mother. Bill believed the case had long been closed and that he was no longer at risk. Nevertheless, during the recorded phone call, he confessed to the crime. On July 25, 2001, Bill Major was arrested and charged with the murder of Marlene. During the interrogation, Bill admitted to the crime but attempted to place the blame on his wife, Marlene. He claimed they were in her car when she pulled out a gun and began threatening him. According to Bill, a struggle broke out, during which he accidentally attacked her several times. He claimed that there were 2 bullets in her head and 4 in her body. However, this testimony seems more like intentional than accidental in a fight. The trial started in 2003, when Bill was 59 years old. After suffering a stroke in 1995, he had lost the ability to walk and appeared in court in a wheelchair. During the trial, his children, Donald and Leona, testified about the abuse and violence they endured during their childhood. They recounted what happened inside the family trailer. Bill's lawyer argued that his actions were linked to nervous tension, claiming that Marlene frequently threatened him, leading to emotional breakdowns. The defense also argued that the murder was an act of self-defense. After a lengthy argument from the defense attorney, Bill looked at his children and smiled, clearly satisfied with the attorney's presentation. He was confident he would remain a free man. However, Leona smiled back at her father and expressed her hope that he would spend the rest of his life in prison for what he had done to them and to Marlene. After deliberating for over 40 minutes, the jury found Bill Major guilty of Marlene's murder. He was sentenced to life in prison. On December 7, 2016, Bill applied for parole, but his request was denied. He died in prison on October 15, 2020. Leona was satisfied with the outcome of the investigation. She had spent much of her life pursuing justice. She believes that Bill murdered Marlene at that time because he suspected Marlene's of having an affair. She believes that Bill meticulously planned the murder out of fear of going to jail and wanting to maintain control over his children, which would allow him to continue to torment them. Notably, Bill's children, Donald and Leona, refused to take their father's last name. Leona later changed it to her husband's. She regrets that during her childhood, she was influenced by her domineering father, causing her to mistakenly believe that her mother had abandoned her. The rest of Marlene's body and her car were never found. However, her family took solace in the fact that justice had been served. Only her mutilated skull was buried. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Timothy McNeel. On July 19, 2007, two police officers responded to the home of 60-year-old Timothy McNeel on Merrick Drive in San Diego, California. Timothy had returned home around noon to have lunch with his stepdaughter, Bray Hansen. During lunch, a masked intruder entered the home and shot Timothy in front of Bray and then quickly fled the scene. Bray called 911. When the police arrived, they found Timothy lying face down on the floor in a pool of blood and was dead. Timothy was wearing a shirt but no pants, which seemed unusual. He may have been changing clothes at the time. Bray was in shock after witnessing the murder of her loved one. She was very distraught, so the police helped calm her down. Bray was the only person who survived the attack and was able to help identify the attacker. Bray was 17 at the time of the incident, and her testimony was invaluable to the police. Once her panic subsided, Bray recounted that a masked armed man entered their home. He ordered her to tie Timothy's hands and then bound her own hands as well. The attacker was aware of a safe containing money and valuables in the house and demanded that Timothy open it. But Timothy refused and was shot. The assailant then fled through the open back door. Police arrived to investigate the scene and quickly discovered a Magnum .357 revolver, which was likely the murder weapon. This weapon was sent for forensic analysis. During the investigation, police found a phone on the pool table and were puzzled as to how Bray could have dialed 911 if she was tied up and the phone was there. The police, accompanied by search dogs, thoroughly searched the areas surrounding the house in hopes of finding more evidence and witnesses. One neighbor mentioned hearing 4 loud pops but didn't think much of them at the time, not realizing they were gunshots. It wasn't until 20 minutes later, when police and special service helicopters arrived and cordoned off the area, that he understood something serious had happened. He then approached the police for more information. Many other neighbors shared similar experiences, with several providing crucial details. They reported seeing a young man run out of Timothy's house in broad daylight, climb over the fence and run down the street. During the search and inspection of the crime scene near the back entrance, police discovered 2 important pieces of evidence: scraps of dark fabric from clothing that the suspect had left behind while fleeing. Along the path leading from the house, they also found a black mask hanging from one of the trees. DNA from the suspect was likely to be present on these clothing items. It was a very hot day, and the police believed the suspect was sweating, so all these materials were sent for further examination. Forensic experts later determined that the scraps of fabric were the remains of a t-shirt the attacker may have been wearing. The gun found at the scene was confirmed to be the murder weapon and was registered to Timothy's second wife, who had died several months earlier. She had kept the gun in her nightstand, leading police to suspect that Timothy's killer was someone close to him. Timothy, a respected lawyer. His family, friends, and neighbors were shocked by his murder. When the police investigated him, they learned that Timothy had lived a clean and upright life, avoiding any connection to trouble or danger. Those who knew him considered him a devoted family man, a good friend, and a man of good humor. He was also a good lawyer, showing remarkable talent in court and not losing a case in many years. A successful lawyer may have encountered a powerful rival who wants to eliminate him, prompting police to investigate the possibility. A survey of Timothy's colleagues revealed that he had several enemies, but no one thought this would lead to such a violent attack on Timothy's home. Police suspect the motive for the crime was related to his family. Timothy had a daughter named Erin McNeel from his first marriage. Erin often mentioned that her father was very kind and skilled at solving problems. During conversations, it became clear that Timothy had been married twice. His second marriage was to Doreen, who had a child from a previous relationship. Timothy met Doreen at his law office when she sought help with her divorce. They connected over their shared experiences as divorced parents with children. Doreen's daughter, Bray, got along well with Timothy's family. She was an excellent student and aspired to become a lawyer like Timothy. Bray was also fluent in French and developed a strong bond with Timothy, who embraced her as his own daughter from the moment he met Doreen. Timothy was remembered by his family as a loving father. When his daughter Erin learned of the incident, she quickly contacted Bray. However, Erin was unable to contact she directly. Bray was being questioned at the police station to provide vital information. One detail from Bray surprised the police. She said that her attacker had used an electronic device to change her voice to sound like a cartoon character. This was unusual for such crimes, as attackers usually try to appear scary rather than funny. Another strange detail emerged during the interrogation when the name Nathaniel was mentioned. Bray accidentally mentioned the robber by this name when talking to the police. However, when the police asked further, she became nervous and denied saying so. This raised the police's suspicions. It seemed likely that Bray was hiding something, prompting them to investigate her further. Unbeknownst to her, the interrogation was being recorded, capturing everything she said. The questioning lasted several hours, after which Bray was taken to her Aunt Bonnie's house, a place she chose because it made her feel safe after the incident. The strange behavior of Bray continued to raise suspicions. Police felt that she was withholding information. When Bray saw a police sketch of the suspect, based on descriptions from neighbors who had seen him running down the street, she pointed out a difference. She mentioned that the suspect's chin looked more square, but it puzzled the police how she could know this since she hadn't seen his face during the crime. Her Aunt Bonnie overheard this comment and began to question Bray's credibility. At the station, Bray reiterated her statement, but struggled to explain how she could identify the attacker's face despite him wearing a mask. After reviewing Bray's statement, the police determined that she had lied. As a result, Bray became a potential suspect in the case. Less than 12 hours after the incident, around 11 p.m., officers arrived at Bonnie's home to arrest Bray Hansen, who was suspected of murdering her stepfather Timothy. When the officers expressed their suspicions, Bray stood up, turned around, and put her hands behind her back. She did not resist or deny her guilt. The police interpreted this as a sign that she was involved. If she were innocent, she would have resisted arrest. Bray then revealed to the police the details of a dark plan targeting Timothy. The girl insisted that she was not at fault. She mentioned that she had unwittingly become involved in a plot orchestrated by her brother Nathaniel. She recounted how Nathaniel broke into their home, restrained her, attacked Timothy, and they fought. She was so frightened at the time, so she turned away. When she heard gunshots, she assumed that Timothy had killed her brother. However, when she looked back, she realized that Timothy had been killed. Bray said she did everything she could to prevent this tragic event. She tried to convince Nathaniel not to kill her stepfather, but was unsuccessful. The news affected Timothy's biological daughter, Erin. She described her heart as truly broken. Erin could not believe that her father had been killed by people he considered close, the children of his second wife, people he raised as family. He had given them a good life, and they had repaid him with betrayal that led to his tragic death. The police then attempt to locate Nathaniel. Bray mentions that her brother lives in Arizona while attending a local college. They continue to interrogate her to find out the truth. During questioning, Bray confesses that she was involved in her stepfather's murder because she played a major role in a plot with her brother. She reveals that she and Nathaniel planned the murder and considered various methods, such as beating Timothy to death with a baseball bat or giving him a lethal injection. Ultimately, they chose not to carry out the act themselves and decided to hire a hitman instead. They hired a hitman and left cash, house keys, and a pistol in a small box in the yard. However, the hitman never showed up, complicating the situation. Nathaniel insisted that they had to act on their own. Bray had previously refused to go with her brother, believing that their plan would never work, while Nathaniel was determined to proceed. He therefore decided to act alone and eventually broke into the house, killing Timothy. The police did not believe Bray's testimony, suspecting that she was hiding something. The police therefore continued to pressure her with leading questions to incriminate Bray. Eventually, she became confused and admitted that she had conspired with her brother. Bray arranged to have lunch with Timothy and informed Nathaniel about it. After Timothy returned home, she and her brother tied Timothy's hands behind his back and forced him to kneel in the laundry room. In this position, Bray killed Timothy with 4 shots. After committing the crime, Nathaniel fled. At this point, it appeared that Bray tried to cry, but no tears came. Bray calmly looked the police in the eyes and coldly recounted the plot and the murder. It was upsetting to see the 17-year-old girl without any emotion and without remorse for her actions. Throughout her testimony, Bray repeatedly blamed her brother for the crime. Bray claimed that she was too scared to tell the truth when she called the police because Nathaniel had threatened her. If Nathaniel were caught, she would also go to jail. However, her explanation raised many questions. They quickly located Nathaniel in the middle of the night. Police then tracked him down and went to his home to arrest him. Police in San Diego, who were leading the murder investigation, were notified of the arrest and flew to Phoenix the next morning to question him. When questioned, Nathaniel initially remained silent and requested a lawyer. However, he quickly changed his mind and decided to speak to the police, waiving his right to legal counsel. During the conversation, he calmly provided vital information, admitting that he had been present at the scene when Timothy was killed. Nathaniel claimed that he had no real motive for the crime. Although he felt anger toward Timothy, especially after being fired from the family business, he insisted that he did not actually want his father to die. When Timothy saw Nathaniel with the gun, his stepfather begged him not to shoot and instead leave the house, promising that Timothy would not call the police. However, Nathaniel did not listen. He killed Timothy. When asked if Bray was involved in the case, Nathaniel insisted that she did not kill Timothy. The police need to determine who actually killed Timothy, which means finding out the motive behind the breakdown of Timothy's relationship with his wife's children. When Timothy met Doreen, she had a 4-year-old daughter, Bray, and a 6-year-old son, Nathaniel. Timothy took on the role of a father to them, but while Bray was bright and cheerful, Nathaniel was very challenging. Timothy made efforts to bond with Nathaniel, but he did not accept Timothy as his mother's new partner and often caused trouble. The problems worsened when Nathaniel and Bray grew up. justifying their behavior by saying that their mother had problems with alcohol, which led her to constantly dump her problems on them. When Nathaniel turned 12, he was forced to move to his grandmother's house in Arizona. There, he worked hard. As he grew older, he developed a knack for computers and became a responsible young man. Nathaniel did well in college and was looking forward to a better future. In 2006, their mother Doreen died from an overdose. This tragedy brought the children and Timothy closer together, especially Nathaniel, who tried his best to stay close to Timothy during this time. Bray had a good relationship with Timothy and often encouraged her brother to maintain a positive relationship with Timothy. Timothy supported and cared for them. Timothy had recently purchased a new computer for Nathaniel, who used it to work at Timothy's company, until an altercation resulted in Nathaniel being fired. Even so, they kept in touch, and Timothy helped him financially. Nathaniel noted that during this time, Timothy's relationship with Bray had deteriorated considerably. They used to be very close, but Bray has recently been angry and emotionally outburst towards Timothy because he started dating someone new. Bray had a few close people she could trust, and her stepfather Timothy meant a lot to her. However, he suddenly began to distance himself from her. During an interview, the police recalled that the Bray had mentioned feeling worthless because of Timothy's recent behavior, but they did not understand what it meant at the time. Now the situation has become clearer. The police discovered that shortly before Doreen died, Timothy had begun a romantic relationship with Kim Mara. This made Bray extremely angry with Timothy, as Bray considered him her own and feared that he would completely cut her out of his life. This was a huge blow to Bray, as she truly loved her second father, but felt that she was becoming meaningless to him. The most shocking moment was when he canceled his birthday party to spend time with his new girlfriend. Nathan claimed he was not in San Diego when the crime occurred, but this was false. DNA evidence found on a mask nearby matched him, and his phone's geolocation confirmed he was at the scene. Neighbors who witnessed a young man fleeing also described Nathaniel, indicating he was present during the crime. Police suspect both Nathaniel and Bray of having something to do with Timothy's death. They have been charged with first-degree murder, including serious aggravating circumstances. The prosecutor's office claims that Timothy was lured into a deadly trap, and as a result, they face life in prison without the possibility of parole. 2 years have passed since Timothy's death, and Nathaniel and Bray are in prison awaiting trial. At the time the trial began, Bray was 19 and Nathaniel was 21. They were tried as adults, but separately. Bray's trial took place first, then Nathaniel's. During Bray's trial, she initially refused to testify against her brother. This situation was complicated by the evidence surrounding the murder. Neither the crime scene nor the weapon had any fingerprints or DNA that belonged to Nathaniel. The prosecutor convinced the jury of Nathaniel and Bray's guilt using circumstantial evidence. This included a mask with Nathaniel's DNA on it and a witness description that identified him as the person who fled the scene of the crime. The jury deliberated all day and ultimately returned a surprising verdict. The jury found Bray Hansen guilty and Nathaniel Gann not guilty. This meant that Bray would face a retrial, much to the prosecutor's disappointment. Meanwhile, it was revealed that the police had failed to provide the prosecution with a recording of Nathaniel's crucial interrogation, in which he confessed to the murder. This recording could have significantly changed the outcome of the case. The judge ruled that this confession could not be presented to the jury because his confession was invalid without legal representation, especially since he was a minor at the time. This was a major setback for the prosecution, as it eliminated their strongest evidence, the criminal's confession. The prosecutor's office decided on a new strategy. They would question both Bray and Nathaniel at the same time, with the goal of holding both men accountable. The evidence would be considered by 2 separate juries. The prosecution argued that this would prove that Bray and Nathaniel had cooperated. The defense faced challenges as well. Nathaniel was easier to defend because his confession could not be presented to the jury. In contrast, Bray's confession, which was recorded on camera, was admitted as evidence in court. The defense attorneys argued that Bray initially intended to execute the criminal plan out of revenge against their father, but later changed her mind. Meanwhile, her brother Nathaniel went through with the plan. The prosecutor's office argued that the idea for the murder came from Bray, who wanted her stepfather dead because she felt abandoned. However, Bray's attorney convinced the jury that Nathaniel had coerced her into the plan by threatening her with a gun and preventing her from escaping. The situation was complicated by numerous lies, which made the jury skeptical of the unproven claims. Additionally, Bray's confession was recorded, and the jury had the opportunity to view the video. At this point, a new character emerged, an informant who had been Nathaniel's cellmate while he awaited trial. The informant said that Bray had significant influence over Nathaniel. She initiated and convinced Nathaniel to commit the murder. The informant's testimony matched what Nathaniel said during his interrogation. However, Bray's defense was quick to point out that Nathaniel had a history of convictions for dishonesty, in an attempt to cast doubt on his testimony and sway the jury against him. To portray Nathaniel as ruthless and dangerous, Bray's lawyer brought his ex-girlfriend to testify in court. The ex-girlfriend admitted that he had abandoned her during their school days. However, she claimed that no dramatic incident had occurred. She had only come to court to take revenge on him. The final piece of evidence was a letter written by Bray on the night of her arrest. This letter was not sent to anyone because she intended to end her life after writing it. In the letter, she indicated that killing Timothy would be easy, quick, and clean. Bray confessed her guilt in this letter and expressed that she never intended to back out of the plot. The trial lasted 2 weeks, and the jury, who will review the evidence and reach a verdict. Bray was indifferent to the outcome, saying she had thought about taking her own life since she was 11 years old. The jury returned a swift verdict in Bray's case, taking just 6 hours to decide. In contrast, the jury in Nathaniel's case deliberated for 2 days, as they found his guilt to be a more complicated matter. Ultimately, both were convicted of first-degree murder. Nathaniel Gann was sentenced to life in prison, but eligible for parole after 25 years. Bray Hansen, on the other hand, received a harsher sentence because the jury determined that she was the one who set him up, which was considered an aggravating factor. As a result, she will spend the rest of her life in prison without parole. Timothy's family was pleased with the verdict. Timothy's biological daughter, Erin, expressed sympathy for Nathaniel and Bray. Erin noted that she grew up mostly with her mother and had less contact with her father than Bray and Nathaniel. Erin got married on the first anniversary of Timothy's death. The date had been set before the tragedy, and the couple decided not to postpone the wedding. In 2015, Bray successfully appealed her sentence, which was reduced to 26 years. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of Sophie Leona. On September 20, 2017, emergency services received a call from concerned residents in Southfields, located in southwest London. The residents reported noticing black smoke coming from the garden of their residential building. When firefighters arrived, they found a couple standing just a few meters away from the fire. Sabrina Kuiter and Wissam Madouni, who lived together in one of the apartments on the first floor of the building, were in the yard grilling sheep. They appeared completely unconcerned by the raging flames. Wissam assured the firefighters that he had the fire under control and that they didn't need help. However, seeing that the flames were spreading, the firefighters urgently extinguished the fire. When Sabrina and Wissam were asked what they were burning, Wissam shrugged and calmly replied that it was the carcass of a sheep he had bought at the market. One of the firefighters took a shovel and began turning over the remains of the fire to ensure it was completely extinguished. As he sifted through the ashes, he made a horrifying discovery. The firefighter found what appeared to be a human nose and fingers. Upon further investigation, he uncovered burnt clothes, glasses, and jewelry. Soon after, the police arrived at the scene. Following their examination, they determined that Sabrina and Wissam had burned a human body in the yard of their home. However, the body was so badly burned that it was impossible to determine the victim's sex or age. After questioning neighbors and speaking with Sabrina and Wissam themselves, the police discovered that a 21-year-old French housekeeper named Sophie Leona had been working in their apartment, had disappeared without a trace after the fire. Sabrina claimed that the housekeeper had quit and flown home 2 weeks earlier. However, DNA results confirmed that Sabrina and Wissam had burned their housekeeper in the yard of their home. Sophie Leona was born on January 7, 1996, in the small town of Troyes in northeastern France. Her parents divorced when she was young, and her mother remarried. Sophie grew up to be a beautiful young woman with long, dark, curly hair and greenish-gray eyes. She was kind, quiet, and shy, with a deep love for animals. Sophie was also involved in charity work, rescuing mistreated cats and dogs. After finishing school, she completed a nanny course and soon received a job offer to work as a housekeeper in London. For Sophie, it was an exciting opportunity. She eagerly accepted the offer and wasn't afraid to leave her small hometown for the bustling city of London. She saw it as an adventure and a chance to overcome her fears, step out of her comfort zone, and grow. In January 2016, 20-year-old Sophie moved to London, where she began working in Sabrina's apartment, helping to care for her 2 sons, aged 8 and 4. At the same time, Sophie worked on improving her English. Sabrina Quitter, 34, and Wissam Madouni, 40, were French citizens living together in Southfields, with Sabrina's 2 sons from her previous relationships. Sabrina was born in Algeria and moved to France as a child. At the age of 19, Sabrina sold pancakes at a fair on the outskirts of Paris. It was there that she met 25-year-old Wissam. He immediately fell in love with her and pursued her persistently with his charm. After some time, they began dating. After 3 years of their relationship, in 2005, they moved from Paris to London. Sabrina found work as a housekeeper in a private home, while Wissam secured a job as a financial analyst at a French bank in London. Wissam began earning a good income and supported Sabrina in pursuing her passion. She started exploring opportunities as a fashion designer and makeup artist, eventually achieving some success. Sabrina became a frequent guest at social events. However, their relationship later fell apart when Sabrina fell in love with another man and became pregnant by him. In 2009, Sabrina gave birth to her first son, but later separated from the baby's father. She later reunited with Wissam, who accepted her without questioning her past. In 2011, Sabrina met another man, Mark Walton, and began a new relationship. She left Wissam completely to commit to Mark. Mark was one of the founders of the Irish boy band Élan Boyzone, which was formed in 1993. Although he was only a member of the group for about a year before being kicked out by the other members, he continued to work in the music industry, and Boyzone later achieved great success. Mark rented a flat in Southfields for Sabrina and supported her financially. After, Sabrina became pregnant and gave birth to her second son. However, their relationship quickly became strained due to constant conflicts, and they separated after only 2 years. Despite the breakup, Mark continued to provide financial support, paying rent for her apartment and providing generously for their son. However, over time, Sabrina's behavior became erratic, prompting Mark to stop providing financial support. He described her as obsessed with him and claimed that Sabrina's actions were often irrational. The breakup was difficult, and Sabrina struggled to get over it. She felt deeply hurt by the separation and feared that Mark might take custody of their son. Sabrina repeatedly called Mark and accused him of harassing her cat, despite not owning any pets. She also believed that Mark had cast a spell on her and was stalking her. Additionally, Sabrina created a fake social network profile to send Mark angry messages. After these accusations, Mark contacted the police and provided around 30 messages from Sabrina filled with lies and threats. The police issued Sabrina a warning and charged her with stalking Mark. After her breakup with Mark, Sabrina reconciled with Wissam. He forgave her once again, and she moved into his apartment. When the police questioned the neighbors, they described the Maduni couple as antisocial and odd. Although Sabrina dressed stylishly, they rarely interacted with others. They avoided greetings, left trash near the house, parked cars in a way that blocked the entrance, and sometimes failed to pay their rent. In 2016, Sabrina hired Sophie to help care for her sons and manage the household. Initially, Sophie enjoyed working for the family and enthusiastically told her mother about her interesting days. She and Sabrina often chatted over tea, and Sabrina even helped Sophie with her hair and makeup, transforming her look. Sophie was happy with her job at first, but over time, the situation began to deteriorate. Sabrina started acting very strangely, convinced that 21-year-old Sophie was working for her ex, Mark Walton. She accused Sophie of helping Mark spy on her and plotting to harm her and her family. Sabrina had a history of depression and borderline personality disorder, manipulated Wissam into believing her delusions. Experts believed Sabrina and Wissam were experiencing shared psychosis, a rare condition in which delusional beliefs and sometimes hallucinations are transmitted from one person to another. Wissam fully supported Sabrina, agreeing with everything she said and followed. Despite showing no signs of mental illness during his psychiatric evaluation, Wissam genuinely believed Sabrina's claims that Mark was stalking her and seeking revenge. At first, when Sabrina began acting aggressively toward Sophie, Wissam would leave the apartment and go for walks. He didn't confront Sabrina or tell her she was wrong, but he also didn't take part in the harassment. Over time, however, Wissam came to believe that Sophie was spying on them. Neighbors in Sophie's area described her as a shy and modest young woman who struggled with English. She rarely interacted with anyone. One of her neighbors, the owner of a local fish restaurant, recalled an incident that occurred about 2 months before the tragedy. Sabrina and Wissam had brought Sophie to the restaurant to discuss a potential business deal. During the meeting, Sophie remained completely silent. The next day, Sophie visited the restaurant alone, visibly upset. When the owner asked what was wrong, she confided that her mother was seriously ill and that she might need to fly home soon. Police later uncovered that, since April, Sophie had been calling her mother regularly, expressing her desire to quit her job and return home. Her mother supported her decision, but for unknown reasons, Sophie kept delaying her departure. On August 8, about a month before the tragedy, Sophie called her mother in tears. Her speech was incoherent, appeared confused and distraught. Around the same time, neighbors noticed that Sophie had stopped going outside and was no longer spending time with Sabrina's sons. By August, it was discovered that Sophie was being regularly beaten, starved, and interrogated. She had stopped receiving her salary and had lost a significant amount of weight. On September 20, 2017, a fire broke out next the residence of Sabrina and Wissam. 2 days later, Sabrina and Wissam were arrested on suspicion of murdering Sophie. Their trial began in March 2018. During the trial, both admitted to attempting to dispose of Sophie's body by burning it in a suitcase outside their home. However, when asked who was responsible for Sophie's death, they blamed each other, refusing to take accountability. The prosecution described the extreme cruelty Sophie endured in her final months. Sabrina's accusations against Sophie and Mark were described as baseless and delusional. Wiesem was portrayed as a submissive and easily manipulated individual who blindly followed Sabrina's lead. For a long time, Sophie was unable to defend herself against the cruel actions of Sabrina and Wiesem. They brutally interrogated Sophie, resorting to physical abuse, including beatings and holding her head underwater in the bathtub. Eventually, they coerced Sophie into admitting to unfounded accusations. Sabrina accused Sophie of conspiring with Mark, claiming they had planned to break into the apartment and drug her and Wiesem with illegal substances. The abuse continued. On September 18, 2 days before Sophie's death, Sabrina recorded a video of her on a mobile phone. In the video, the 21-year-old appeared severely emaciated and emotionally destroyed, confessing under duress to collaborating with Mark Walton. Shortly after this recording, Sophie was killed. Investigators later uncovered around 8 hours of footage on Sabrina and Wiesem's phones, documenting their relentless interrogation and torment of Sophie before her body was burned. Sophie had been violently assaulted. Her jaw was broken, her sternum fractured, and several ribs damaged. Sabrina and Wiesem believed they could cover up the murder by burning Sophie's body and claiming she had quit her job and returned to France. Sophie's body was severely damaged that the exact cause of death could unlikely be determined. The medical examiner suspected she died from blunt force trauma, strangulation, or drowning. During the investigation, authorities discovered that Sophie's passport and the plane ticket her mother had purchased for her to return to France were missing, likely destroyed by Sabrina and Wiesem. Mark traveled from Los Angeles to London to testify against Sabrina. He stated that despite loving her deeply, he could not tolerate her volatile and unpredictable behavior. Mark explained that he never knew when Sabrina might have an outburst and start yelling at him. He also revealed that, during their time living together, they had hired multiple housekeepers, but Sabrina became jealous of these women and fired them one by one. She suspected the housekeepers were flirting with Mark and trying to sabotage their relationship. Mark clarified that he had never met Sophie or had any interaction with her. He first learned about her on September 21, when London police contacted him the day after the tragic incident. Wiesem initially claimed that Sophie had died accidentally during an interrogation in the bathtub. He stated that he failed to lift her head out of the water in time. However, during the trial, he provided a completely different account. He confessed that on September 20, Sabrina woke him up, saying Sophie was not breathing. When he went to check, he found Sophie in the bathtub. Wiesem alleged that it was Sabrina who had killed Sophie. Sabrina, on the other hand, accused Wiesem of holding Sophie's head underwater. She claimed that after pulling Sophie's head out, he struck her hard in the face, causing her to fall back into the bathtub, hit the tiles, and lose consciousness. Sabrina stated that she later found Sophie in the tub, pulled her out, and tried to save her, but was unsuccessful. On 24 May 2018, following an intense 2-month trial, both Sabrina Coater and Wiesem Maduni were found guilty of murder. During the sentencing, a letter from Sabrina was read aloud in court. In the letter, she expressed profound remorse and apologized to Sophie and her family for the heartbreaking tragedy. Sabrina reflected on happy memories with Sophie, admitted that she thought about her every day, and shared her sense of bewilderment over the events that had transpired. She described the incident as a terrible dream and conveyed deep disappointment in herself and her life. The judge concluded that both Sabrina and Wiesem had succumbed to a state of severe delusion, which led to this cruel act. Ultimately, both Sabrina and Wiesem were sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Hello again, true crime fans. we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jean Pierre Triber. At approximately 3 p.m., on November 4, 2004, a woman named Maria went to a police station in Burgundy, France, to report the disappearance of her sister, Katia L'Herbier. Maria was worried because her sister had not been in touch for several days. Katia has not been to work since November 1st and has missed important meetings, which is very unusual. The last person to speak with Katia was a family member, Sonia L'Herbier. Katia had met her friend, Geraldine Girard, on November 1. Katia had planned to spend the weekend with her. Since that day, Geraldine had also gone missing. She was known for her punctuality, making her sudden disappearance very concerning. Both women had not been reachable, and Geraldine's voicemail was full. 3 days had passed, and the gendarmes insisted there was no cause for concern. They argued that Katia and Geraldine had simply gone to a country house to relax, and that their fun may have lasted longer than expected. This dismissive attitude from the police prompted Geraldine's father to reach out to the prosecutor's office to initiate a search, but he received a similarly indifferent response. Frustrated by the lack of action from the authorities, Geraldine's brother decided to conduct his own investigation. Geraldine's family was aware of her friend Venue, although no one had seen Venue yet. Venue and Geraldine met just 2 weeks before she went missing, through a mutual friend, and they quickly became close. Geraldine's family searched for her silver Peugeot 206 on the outskirts of the city, but their efforts were fruitless. A few days later, they made a public appeal through the media. News of Katia and Geraldine's disappearance sparked a strong public reaction, and that attracted the attention of law enforcement. A search operation was launched, and media interest grew, particularly because the case involved well-known individuals. During the initial investigation, police were able to track Katia and Geraldine's mobile phone locations, review their last calls. The last call from Geraldine's phone was made on November 1, 2004, when she contacted a stranger near La Pistole, near a country house. They later discovered that on the evening of November 1, her card was used to withdraw about $260 at 9:50 p.m., shortly after she made her last call. The detectives requested surveillance footage from the ATM to identify who made the withdrawal. Footage shows 2 young women, resembling Katia and Geraldine, making a cash withdrawal. The next day, November 2, about $72 was withdrawn from Katia's card in Paris. This did not raise suspicion, as she often traveled to Paris for work or shopping. Unfortunately, the footage from that camera could not be obtained. There was also a purchase made at a nearby supermarket. Detectives went to the store and spoke with the cashier. The employee did not clearly remember the 2 women's faces, but had a vague memory of them making a purchase. The store did not have a security system in place to capture the transaction. The only unusual detail was the receipt, which showed a purchase of cheap beer and spicy snacks. Katia and Geraldine's relatives insisted that none of them bought such things because they had never used them before. If they want to drink alcohol, they will prefer fine wine. It was concerning that they had not contacted their families. The investigation continues, focusing on another supermarket. Detectives reviewed surveillance footage, but found no one resembling Katia and Geraldine. The shopping list had an oddity. A pack of diapers had been purchased, which was unusual since they had no children. Luckily, the cashier remembered that a man had bought diapers. This caused serious concerns, as Katia and Geraldine could not give their cards to a stranger. The cashier reviewed the camera footage and recognized the buyer, although she did not know his name. He was a man of about 40 years old and had a bald spot on his head. Police have a blurry image of the suspect involved in the kidnapping of Katia and Geraldine. His arrest is crucial to finding out how Geraldine and Katia's bank cards ended up in his hands. Luckily for investigators, the man reappeared. His next transaction took place at a gas station. Surveillance cameras captured the incident, showing a man driving a white Peugeot 205. The recordings provide clearer images, revealing part of the license plate. An analysis of the databases yielded 800 matches for that plate in the area, but only 6 were registered as Peugeot 205 cars. Within hours, the search was narrowed down to one specific individual. The man in question was Jean Pierre Triber. A check of his address revealed that he lived near the ATM where the first transaction occurred, just a few kilometers away. The last signal from Geraldine's phone pointed to his residence, but when the detectives arrived, he was not there. They then go to his workplace and learn that he is currently on vacation. However, detectives confirmed images from the supermarket and gas station showed it was Jean, 44 years old. The office clerk informed the detectives that Jean would be returning to work the next morning. They planned to wait for him at 7:35 a.m. When he drove the white car into the parking lot, they arrested him. He remained calm and did not seem to understand the situation. They quickly confiscated his wallet and discovered that it contained Katia and Geraldine's cards. Jean Pierre Triber was born on April 8, 1963, in Loisa. He was the youngest of 3 children in his family. His father was a war veteran, and his mother was a homemaker. He dropped out of school in the 5th grade and later attended the Agricultural Academy. But he did not graduate due to an eye condition. A failed surgery resulted in him having a half-closed eyelid. He enjoyed hunting and started a tree trimming business, which ultimately failed. He then worked as a forester and later as an agricultural worker. Most recently, he had a job in an office. In 1989, he married a woman who had a child from a previous relationship, and he treated that child as his own. They have a daughter, and he may have bought diapers for her. Jean was quickly arrested. During his initial questioning, he claimed that he had met Katia and Geraldine about a month earlier, when they had given him a lift to another city. However, he later changed his story, stating that he had seen them regularly over the past several months. He also mentioned that the 3 of them had gone bowling and had dinner together several times. This was obviously a lie, as they had only known each other for 2 weeks. As investigators questioned Jean, he began to add more strange details to his story. Eventually, he claimed that Geraldine, Katia had planned their escape and that he had helped them in some way. For example, he said that they gave him their bank cards so that he could freely access their money. He suggested that this was a gesture of thanks, but he never clarified what specific help he had provided. He hid this information from the police, which made his story seem unconvincing, and no one believed him. The investigators searched Jean's house, but found no incriminating evidence. He was arrested because they suspected he was concealing more information. He becomes the prime suspect in a kidnapping or even a double murder. During subsequent questioning, he gave a new story, claiming that he had met Katia and Geraldine in late summer 2004. They would spend time together, despite the fact that Katia and Geraldine did not know each other at the time. The detectives chose not to confront him about this obvious lie, allowing him to continue his narrative. Jean admitted that on November 1, 2004, he and Katia and Geraldine agreed to meet. Geraldine proposed a strange plan to blackmail someone, and all 3 traveled to Paris, where they intended to visit a bar and wait for a specific person to arrive. The plan involved breaking the window of the person's car and stealing 2 suitcases from inside. Jean plans to deliver the stolen items to Katia and Geraldine. They will then go to another bar together to meet 2 more people and exchange the suitcases. Jean claims that their plan was successful, but then Katia and Geraldine disappear. Although his story was convincing, detectives noticed that he seemed to be fabricating details as he spoke. Upon examining his mobile phone, they discovered inconsistencies in his account. When confronted with these discrepancies, he appeared visibly unsettled. Strangely, he had never been in trouble with the law before and seemed to be a kind, calm man with his wife and children. However, he was experiencing marital issues and had moved in with his parents during that time. He was struggling financially, relying on temporary jobs until he eventually secured a position in an office. Jean was accused of kidnapping women, theft, and fraud. As a result, the media reported extensively on the investigation, making the details of the case public. Journalists were especially interested because Geraldine is a famous media personality and the daughter of a famous actor. They shared various details about Geraldine's life, attempting to highlight her alleged close relationship with Jean. On December 6, a neighbor of Jean provided new information to the investigators. He reported that on the evening of November 1, he observed Jean working diligently in his garden. The neighbor noted that Jean spent several consecutive days, from November 1st to November 5, engaged in various gardening activities, which he found unusual. He witnessed Jean trimming bushes, removing stumps, and burning debris. This behavior aroused suspicion, leading investigators to search Jean's parents' plots to find the bodies of Katia and Geraldine, along with evidence. On the morning of December 8, 2004, several police vehicles appeared and blocked off the area to conduct a search. Specially trained police dogs also joined the operation. Officers conducted a thorough search of the property and discovered a freshly dug hole resembling a grave. To investigate, they dug approximately half a meter deep until they encountered a tree root. Although the hole was ultimately empty, it appeared to have been prepared for some purpose, likely to conceal bodies. Additionally, the extinguished fire revealed many burned items, including pieces of a mobile phone, scraps of women's clothing, a watch strap, several perfume bottles, and keys. These items were consistent with those belonging to Geraldine. In the barn, they also found an unusual elephant-shaped keychain that Geraldine always kept with her. This evidence linked Jean to the deaths of Katia and Geraldine. To ensure reliable information, it is important to locate the bodies of Katia and Geraldine. The following day, the police continued their search and found a cesspool in the area. They discovered 2 naked bodies, but extracting them proved difficult because they were mostly submerged in sewage, and there was limited space to work. Special equipment was brought in for the extraction process, which took nearly all night. The bodies were identified as Geraldine Giraud and Katia L'Herbier. Detectives quickly observed that their mouths had been stuffed with objects and gagged with duct tape, while their faces were covered with what appeared to be death masks. Jean, the main suspect, requested a lawyer and denied any wrongdoing. He claimed that he did not know how Katia and Geraldine died. However, the prosecutor's office disagreed, believing Jean was either responsible for the double murder or complicit in a horrific crime. After the bodies were found, he changed his story, claiming that Geraldine and Katia had indeed visited him, but were later taken away by 2 men dressed in black. He alleged that the men were involved in a furniture transfer at a bar in Paris, and that he had seen Katia and Geraldine with them before disappearing. The detectives decide to team up with Jean and ask him to create a composite sketch of the individuals dressed in black. In February 2005, he created 2 photographs. Unfortunately, no one was able to identify the individuals in the sketches, rendering them ineffective. By this time, the autopsy results of Katia and Geraldine were available. Due to the poor condition of the bodies, the forensic expert could not determine the exact cause of death. Possible injuries, such as weapon or knife wounds, as well as signs of strangulation, remain inconclusive. The condition of their lungs raised many questions, with suspicions that they may have been poisoned with some kind of gas. The estimated time of death corresponds to the time they went missing. However, the poor state of the bodies made it challenging to pinpoint an exact date. They were likely killed on November 1st and may have been held captive for 2 days, possibly in Jean's house, before he dealt with them. There is no evidence to confirm that he kept them imprisoned in his house. However, his mobile phone provided a clue. He activated it on November 2nd in the hospital parking lot area in Paris, where Geraldine's car was subsequently found. During a thorough search of Jean's home, police discovered a weapon and duct tape similar to the one used to wrap Katia and Geraldine's faces. However, the weapon was not the murder weapon. The investigation shifted back to the theory of gas poisoning. Their underwear was found in Jean's house, and his DNA was discovered on that underwear. Additionally, investigators believe he may have poisoned them with gas or some other poison. Another theory suggested that he could have used a type of food that, if inhaled over an extended period, could also lead to the deaths of Geraldine and Katia. However, Jean's defense team questioned the police's theories. They argued that if he had really killed Katia and Geraldine, he would not have dumped their bodies on his land. Given his familiarity with the surrounding forest, he could have easily hidden them, making it risky to leave the bodies in a place associated with him. Additionally, they found the proposed financial motive to be unlikely. Jean used only a small fraction of the large sum of money on Katia and Geraldine's credit cards. His family also found it hard to believe that he was involved in the murder. However, the prosecutor's office argued that there was a financial motive behind the crimes. By November 2004, he was struggling financially, earning just over $900 a month, barely enough to cover basic needs. He is in dire need of money and sees Katia and Geraldine as potential solutions. When police searched the storage room at his parents' home, they found tape that matched the tape used to wrap Katia and Geraldine's heads. They also discovered a hair on the tape that was believed to be similar to Geraldine's hair. The lawyer objected to this evidence, arguing that the police had only found hair without the necessary follicles for accurate DNA matching, meaning it was impossible to confirm its source. The prosecution faced several troubling questions. On November 26, 2004, an opportunity arose to shed light on these issues. When police arrested Patricia Darboux, Jean's girlfriend, they frequently called and contacted each other. He met Patricia in 2003 and became her friend first, and then her boyfriend. Over time, they spent a lot of time together and began to communicate regularly. During this period, he was financially stable, working as a forester and supporting a family. However, he later attempted to involve Patricia in financial fraud related to illegal activities, specifically the trade of contraband cigarettes. The police discovered that this seemingly modest and honest man had connections to organized crime. He is particularly interested in stolen credit card dealers. Patricia admitted that she got into trouble because of one of his schemes, but he helped her avoid serious consequences. Patricia's testimony revealed that Jean had long-standing ties to the criminal underworld, contradicting claims that he was an innocent man who had recently fallen into a life of crime. In this context, Jean's account is unreliable. He later alleged that he tried to cooperate with Katia and Geraldine in some scheme, but things did not go as planned. The police decided to investigate people close to Jean to gather more information. This investigation lasted for more than 4 years, and they discovered that many of his friends and acquaintances were petty criminals, mainly involved in theft, kidnapping, and fraud. However, none of these individuals knew Katia and Geraldine. It seems that Jean needed help to kill Katia and Geraldine, as it seems he could not do it himself. Eventually, the detectives turned their attention to Geraldine's aunt, Marie Christine Van Kempen, who introduced Katia to Geraldine. Marie was a singer, artist, and voice teacher. At the funeral, Marie acted strangely. Her inconsistent statements to police raised suspicions, as she changed her mind several times. This led to a theory that she might have had a motive for the murders. Perhaps she had a big argument with Katia and Geraldine, which may have caused her to contact Jean for help. Alternatively, there might have been another motive linked to a troubling incident from her past. As a teenager, Marie tried to convince Geraldine that her father had abused her, but this was not true. Geraldine denied this and told her father that Marie had made her say these false things. The reasons behind Marie's actions remain unclear. Marie was later arrested on suspicion of being involved in a murder. Further searches of Marie's home uncovered numerous recordings, leading investigators to suspect that she had a complicated relationship with Geraldine. This raised questions about whether that relationship may have motivated her actions. They also found masks and tape similar to those used to cover Katia and Geraldine's mouths. In particular, there were traces of chloroform on some of the masks. However, her family insists that she is incapable of murder. They believe that the strained relationship between Marie and Katia, Geraldine, stems from each person's personal habits, which make communication difficult. After spending 31 hours in police custody, Marie was released after convincingly explaining the suspicious evidence to the police. A witness also emerged to corroborate her account. They discovered that the chloroform on the masks was actually residue from insecticides left by the apartment's previous owner. As a result, all suspicions against Marie were cleared. Although the prosecutor's office had little evidence against Jean, after 4 years of investigation, the grand jury decided to proceed with trial. The evidence presented by the prosecution faced strong opposition during the preliminary hearings. The judge scheduled the trial for the end of 2009. However, just before the first official hearing in September 2009, Jean escaped from prison. This escape aligned with the profile suggested by psychiatrists, indicating that it was more calculated than the detectives had realized. A week after his escape, he wrote to a close friend, asserting his innocence and claiming that he had been wrongfully imprisoned. He portrayed himself as a victim of a conspiracy, convinced that the actual killers were trying to frame him. In another letter, he described his life in the forest as difficult, but still better than being imprisoned on false charges. For 5 weeks, Jean evaded the entire French police force in a dramatic chase. Finally, a surveillance camera captured his image on a street. Unfortunately for law enforcement, by the time they arrived, he had already escaped again. It was later revealed that he was not living in the forest as he had claimed. Instead, he was staying in the apartment of a friend who was away and unaware of his presence. On November 20, 2009, he was arrested, but after returning to prison, he began to complain again. On February 20, 2010, Jean was found dead in prison. This incident caused further grief to Katia and Geraldine's family, as his death prevented them from learning the truth about Katia and Geraldine's deaths. He has always maintained his innocence, but has tried every way to avoid facing the jury, prosecutors, and judge. Welcome back to our channel. Today we'll dive into a new case. The case of Kelly Bullwinkle. Kelly Bullwinkle was born in Petaluma, Sonoma County, California, United States. She is the only child of Diana Dolores Gonzalez, a Coast Guard sergeant, and Robert. When Kelly was 3 years old, her parents divorced and she lived with her mother. Despite her busy work schedule, Diana raised Kelly with love and dedication, and they often received help from Kelly's grandparents, Dolores Fuller and Jesus Gonzalez, who often traveled from Las Cruces, New Mexico to visit. Growing up, Kelly was a quiet and shy girl, but those who knew her were captivated by her delicate features. She had a deep love for animals, especially horses. Whenever she saw a horse, her face lit up with joy, and she eagerly asked her mother to keep one as a pet. Kelly was also passionate about music. She quickly learned to play the clarinet while still in elementary school, impressing everyone with her ability to perform complex pieces with incredible skill. In 1999, as Kelly prepared to start high school, Diana was transferred to Redlands, a picturesque city in San Bernardino County, California. The family moved in with Laura, a close friend of Diana's. The relocation brought major changes to Kelly's life. She had to meet new neighbors, start at a new school, and adjust to an unfamiliar environment, all of which proved difficult for her. Redlands East Valley High School, the largest in the city, and presented its own challenges. The school was divided into cliques, athletes, leaders, and laggards, making it hard for Kelly to find her place. Even walking through the noisy cafeteria at lunchtime felt overwhelming. Kelly often felt lonely and doubted her ability to fit in with her school community. To relieve stress, she turned to reading and started keeping a personal diary, which became her trusted outlet. Over time, Kelly took up mountain biking and joined the track and field team. Her dedication to sports paid off as she began to succeed in competitions. Eventually, one of Kelly's childhood dreams came true when her mother gifted her a horse as a reward for her efforts. In her third year of high school, Kelly became friends with two classmates, Rachel Schneider and Megan LaSmith. Like many teenagers, Kelly looked up to Rachel and began imitating her style. She dyed her hair red to match Rachel's, started shopping at thrift stores, and wore the same shade of red lipstick as her. In 2001, Rachel introduced Kelly to her other friends, including Kinsey Jean Nordman. Kinsey, a senior born in 1983 in Redlands, was the only child of Bruce and Deborah Nordman. Her father, a well-known local postman, and her mother, a devoted leader of a Girl Scout group, raised Kinsey in a loving and optimistic environment. From a young age, Kinsey was described by relatives as sweet, kind, and affectionate. She had a gentle nature, enjoyed football games and reading, and was passionate about helping sick and homeless animals, often turning her home into a temporary shelter for them. Her family fully supported her interests, creating a joyful and encouraging atmosphere. Birthdays were always memorable celebrations, and family trips were filled with happiness. Bruce enjoyed spending time with Kinsey's friends and often invited them on family outings. One frequent visitor to the Nordman household was Kinsey's cousin, who taught everyone how to surf. During high school, Kinsey grew close to a classmate named Damian Matthew Guerrero, born in 1983. Damian lived in a wealthy neighborhood near Redlands. Not much was known about his family, which included his mother, stepfathers, and brother. He was known for his arrogance and fascination with Gothic culture. His signature look included makeup, black and white outfits, and a vintage 1940s style hat. Girls admired him for his dark hair and enigmatic presence, while others were intrigued by his knack for turning any topic into a philosophical discussion, making conversations with him engaging. He often quoted lines from Quentin Tarantino films, as Tarantino was his idol. Even though he was weirdo, but Damian was both hardworking and academically capable. Under Damian's influence, Kelly underwent a significant transformation. She abandoned her sporty California style and adopted a Gothic look. She developed a strong interest in writing articles about serial killers. She became interested in writing about serial killers, a subject she was very passionate about. She also became drawn to industrial bands, with Tool becoming her favorite. Her favorite movie was American Psycho. She and Damian often discussed the film's characters, Mickey and Mallory, with their classmates, praising them enthusiastically. Kelly's family disapproved of the changes in her behavior and began keeping a closer eye on her social circle. However, her cousin reacted differently. He welcomed Damian and even started visiting him frequently. The two grew close, bonding over shared interests and collections. They were particularly fascinated by a mysterious weapon Damian owned, which had once belonged to Damian's brother. Over time, Diana became increasingly concerned about her daughter's friendship with Damian. Despite her mother's strong disapproval of her relationship with Damian, Kelly refused to change her mind. This caused a rift between her and her mother, further straining their relationship. Diana believed that Kelly was only trying to mock her, provoke her, and draw attention to Kelly. Meanwhile, rumors began circulating at school that Kelly and Damian's relationship was more than just friendship. In reality, however, Damian was dating another girl, Jennifer. Jennifer, born in Redlands in 1985, was known for her bold appearance and impeccable sense of style. Damien fell for her almost instantly after their first conversation. They discovered they shared many interests, particularly in music and cinema. Jennifer attended building with Kelly, while Kinsey studied in a different building. Although different, Kelly and Kinsey quickly bonded over their shared love of writing. Eventually, Kelly joined the group formed by Kinsey, Damien, and Jennifer, who welcomed her without hesitation. Kelly began adopting not only the fashion choices, but also the behaviors of her new friends. This group displayed a deliberate disregard for social norms and seemed unafraid or even eager to be rejected by society. Immersing herself in this circle, Kelly created a virtual diary on LiveJournal under the pseudonym Anna, where she portrayed herself as a girl struggling with anorexia. Though this was untrue, Kelly was fascinated by the idea of taking on this new persona. At the same time, she began experimenting with illegal substances. Despite only dabbling in them, she started labeling herself as a banned substance addict. It seemed as though Kelly was determined to showcase her darkest, most flawed side. She deliberately became provocative and destructive. Wanting to fully embrace her new identity, she distanced herself from Rachel, who quickly noticed how negatively the group was influencing her friend. However, fractures soon developed within the group itself. The conflict was fueled by Kelly's growing and uncontrollable attraction to Damien, which Jennifer easily noticed. On top of that, Jennifer was irritated by the fact that Kelly, trying to please Damien, copied his style and behavior. The tension steadily escalated, and what had once been a normal friendship between the girls devolved into open rivalry. In 2002, the group had the opportunity to become the center of attention and spark a wave of discussions, which they seemed to enjoy. That year, Kinsey and Damien graduated from high school. Meanwhile, Kelly and Kinsey came up with the idea to attend prom together. They were not a couple, but the plan was driven by curiosity to see their classmates' reactions. They think that it could possibly create a scandal. During the party, the girls told everyone they were under the influence of banned substance and tried to persuade Damien to join them. Jennifer responded quickly, opposing the idea and urging Damien to refuse. Kelly became upset, believing Jennifer was acting out of jealousy. The tension escalated when Damien's date accused Kelly of lying, pointing out that Kelly was wearing the same shoes as Damien. This led to an exchange of insults, with emotions spiraling out of control. Then, as energetic music played, Kelly and Kinsey kissed on the dance floor, drawing the attention of their classmates. Many speculated that the kiss was merely a stunt to grab everyone's attention. A few hours later, the party ended, and with it, the friends stopped trying to show their worst sides. After starting university, Kinsey and Damien remained close friends and kept in touch with Kelly as well. They often went to the cinema, explored fairs in the city center. Among them, Kelly was the only one without a partner, and Damien was still dating Jennifer. When the trio couldn't meet in person, they stayed connected through chat, where they planned their next outings or shared music and posts they enjoyed. However, due to Jennifer's jealousy, Damien sometimes acted rudely toward Kelly when they met in public. In private, though, his behavior changed, and their interactions became much friendlier. By early 2003, Damien and Kelly confessed their mutual attraction and began a secret relationship. Kelly's happiness was hard to conceal. For Kelly, Damien was the first man who had been truly serious about her, making it difficult for her to resist him. Her life began to change dramatically. Through Kinsey, she got in touch with two local banned substance dealers, Jim and Bob. At one point, Jim and Bob demanded $100 from her to pay for banned substance, but Kelly had grown accustomed to getting them for free. As her addiction worsened, she began finding other ways to sustain her habit. She secured a part-time job at a restaurant. In the spring of 2003, Kelly and Jennifer graduated from high school, but their rivalry only intensified. Now considered a love destroyer, Kelly felt an overwhelming urge to publicly declare her relationship with Damien. She enrolled at Crafton Hills, just a 20-minute drive from her home, allowing her to stay close to Damien. Meanwhile, Jennifer was determined to turn Kelly's friends against her. Jennifer manipulated Kinsey and Damien into excluding Kelly from their group and even encouraged them to humiliate her at parties, inviting her only to mock her in front of others. That summer was a nightmare for Kelly. Her friends argued with her over trivial matters, publicly mocked her, and humiliated her. What hurt even more was that she couldn't understand why they were doing it. Despite this, Kelly, being sensitive and dependent, couldn't bring herself to cut ties with them. For the first time, she wished that Damien would leave Jennifer, but the opposite happened. Damien told Kelly their relationship was over and demanded Kelly stay out of his life. One of the people who had insulted Kelly decided to reveal her secret meetings with Damien to Jennifer, hoping to expose Damien, who Jennifer was planning to build a life with. However, even Damien's betrayals didn't come as a surprise to Jennifer. On September 2, 2003, Jennifer messaged Kelly, demanding an explanation. Kelly confessed everything and received a response filled with threats. A few days later, Kinsey and Damien came up with a cruel prank to play on Kelly. Knowing how easily she got nervous, they decided to take her to San Timoteo Canyon, also known as the Ghost Town. On September 11, while texting with Kelly, Kinsey suggested they go for a walk together. Trusting her friend, Kelly agreed. The next day, Kinsey and Damien headed to San Timoteo Canyon, equipped with a shovel. They dug a deep hole, planning to scare Kelly by making her believe they were going to kill her and bury her there. On September 13, 2003, at 4:20 p.m., Kelly told her family she was going out with friends and left in her Mazda Protégé. She had hidden a small bag of banned substance under the waistband of her pants. After stopping briefly at an ATM, she continued driving and met Kinsey. Together, they smoked and casually chatted while walking. Later, Kinsey suggested they grab a snack. As they approached Kelly's car, Damien suddenly arrived in his black Honda Civic. Surprised, Kelly asked what he was doing there. Damien says he has a plan and wants them to join in. After some convincing from her friends, Kelly reluctantly agreed to go to the canyon, even though she didn't like the ghost town. When they were already there, at some point Damien walked away from Kelly and Kinsey for a few minutes, and that's when Kelly found herself face to face with a grave and a shovel. She didn't have time to realize what happened, because Damien suddenly appeared in front of her again with a weapon in his hands. Later, the weapon activated unexpectedly. Seriously wounded, Kelly fell just a few steps from the pit. Kinsey became a witness of the scene. Damien began to justify himself, saying that everything happened by accident. Kelly was still alive at that time and was shaking convulsively. Damien, in a state of shock, handed the weapon to Kinsey and said that he could not do it again. Kinsey took the weapon and, without further ado, attacked Kelly in the head. After that, they put the body in a hole and buried it. Seeing an old orange sofa abandoned nearby by someone, Damien and Kinsey dragged it to a fresh grave and left the scene. In Kelly's car, near the Ontario Mills Shopping Center, they abandoned the car and keys, then changed clothes and returned to Redlands in Damien's car. A little later, they had dinner together and at 9:20 p.m. went to the cinema. Diana, Kelly's mother, was not at home at that time. She had gone to the sea. Her friend Laura was outside the city. In these circumstances, no one noticed Kelly's absence. However, when Laura returned on September 15, she discovered alarming signs: unsorted mail, lights on, and hungry pets. In addition, Kelly's answering machine had accumulated messages from colleagues who were worried about her due to her absence from work. Laura called the police. Officers began searching for Kelly and found her car within a few hours. When she received news that her daughter was missing, Diana immediately called friends and acquaintances for help. They launched a search throughout the city, the San Bernardino Valley, and the desert. The search for Kelly was assisted by a Hawk helicopter provided by the Coast Guard. The police, meanwhile, interrogated everyone who knew Kelly. The first on the list of her close friends was Kinsey. During the interrogation, she provided a reliable alibi, claiming that she had not seen her friend for a long time. She also admitted that they planned to meet on September 13, but Kelly suddenly stopped communicating. So Kinsey went for a walk with Damien. In addition, she mentioned the banned substance addiction of Kelly and gave investigators the contacts of banned substance dealers Jim and Bob, who could possibly point to Kelly's whereabouts. It turned out that the two were in custody on charges of carjacking, a fact that automatically put them at the top of the list of suspects in Kelly's kidnapping. However, once they were questioned, they began to deny any involvement in her disappearance and claimed to have an alibi. The Manns were involved in a series of crimes in the Redlands area, but had nothing to do with what happened to Kelly. Nevertheless, the police obtained a warrant to search their home and then excluded them from the case. Days passed in despair. Diana took out an ad and told the media about Kelly's disappearance. Kinsey also joined the search and supported the efforts. A few days later, a group of young men were exploring San Timoteo Canyon. Something unusual caught their attention. An unpleasant smell emanated from a cliff next to an old sofa lying in the bushes. After they reported this to the police, officers immediately arrived and secured the area. Under the sofa, human remains were found sticking out of the ground. After that, the site was examined, and a cartridge case of a 9mm caliber was found during the excavation of a female body, which was urgently sent to the morgue for the appropriate forensic analysis. Days later, a preliminary autopsy report confirmed that the deceased was Kelly and that her cause of death was one of 2 bullet wounds. Diana was shocked by the terrible news. A wave of suspicion swept across Redlands as each of the young people came under scrutiny. Those questioned all became potential suspects, and rumors of Kinsey's involvement in the murder began to spread. The police searched the house where Kelly lived and confiscated her computer, on which a lot of materials for the investigation were found, hundreds of chats, threats from Jennifer, and much more. Jennifer was also interrogated, during which she denied her guilt. Simultaneously, there was no convincing evidence against her. When investigators questioned Kelly's cousin, he revealed that he had once seen Damien holding a small silver weapon. After further questioning, Damien admitted that his brother gave him a .25 caliber weapon last fall. He claimed to have thrown the weapon into a drainage well. Detectives searched the well after Damien provided its location, but found nothing. The investigation continued, and a bullet of the same caliber was later discovered in a chest of drawers. This bullet matched the cartridge case found at the crime scene. However, without the weapon, it was difficult to formally charge Damien. On November 3, 2003, the case took a significant turn. Jennifer, Damien's ex-girlfriend, went to the authorities and provided a statement about events that had occurred during the summer involving Kinsey, Damien, and herself. The following day, Kinsey was brought in for questioning. Under pressure, she confessed to being involved but claimed the situation had spiraled out of control unintentionally. Her confession provided enough evidence for an arrest, but in exchange for more information, Kinsey was allowed to return home. Once home, she told her mother everything. Her mother, Deborah, was shocked and unable to comprehend how or why her daughter could have committed murder. She was also baffled as to why the authorities had let Kinsey go. Feeling guilty, Kinsey called her boyfriend and confessed everything, including Damien's involvement. Understanding the gravity of the situation, her boyfriend reported it to the authorities. An hour later, Kinsey was arrested, followed by Damien. Both were charged with murder and faced life in prison due to their intentional use of a firearm. Their bail was set at $5 million each to ensure their presence at the trial. On February 17, 2005, the trial of Kinsey and Damien began. The prosecution argued that the crime had been carefully planned and executed with cold-blooded precision. They emphasized that this murder was far more severe than a typical teenage dispute. In his defense, Damien maintained that he never intended to harm Kelly and claimed that Kinsey was directly responsible for Kelly's death. Kinsey's defense, on the other hand, acknowledged the enormity of her mistake, describing it as monstrous, and expressed deep remorse for causing the death of her close friend. On March 9, 2005, Kinsey was convicted of first-degree murder and using a weapon during the crime. However, the jury could not reach a unanimous decision regarding Damien's involvement, leading to a delay in his case. 2 months later, a hearing was held where the verdict was announced. The judge described the crime as one of the most tragic and senseless cases he had ever encountered. Kinsey was sentenced to 45 years in prison without the possibility of parole, and was sent to a women's correctional facility at California in Chino. In May 2005, after reaching a plea agreement, Damien was sentenced to 15 years and incarcerated at Chuckawalla Valley in Blythe. Kelly's grandparents, Dolores and Jesus, were present in the courtroom, their faces showing both sadness and relief. With a trembling voice, Jesus expressed his sorrow at being robbed of the chance to see their granddaughter grow up. Dolores shared that nothing could ever fill the void left in her life. Over time, her health declined significantly, forcing her to leave her job. In February 2014, Dolores passed away. In 2018, Damien was denied parole. However, on October 24, 2019, a special commission unexpectedly approved his parole. In March 2020, California governor reversed this decision, stating that Damien still posed a serious risk to public safety. In January 2023, Damien attended his final parole hearing and was granted parole, which reignited intense debate. County attorney voiced hope that the decision would eventually be overturned. For now, Damien remains in prison, awaiting the final outcome. Kelly Bullwinkle was a model student with a promising future. Her naivety, trust in people, and desire to be accepted by others ultimately led to her death. Kelly did not doubt the trustworthiness of her friends, even after they got her hooked on banned substance and treated her cruelly. Kinsey openly rejected her, put her in a bad light, and eventually took her life in their merciless, bloody game. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Linda Loisa. Linda Loisa was born on December 12, 1982 in La Victoria, a city in the state of Mérida, Venezuela. She grew up in a modest family and had 10 siblings. From an early age, she developed a strong interest in animals and often helped her parents with their livestock business. This passion prompted her to enroll in an agricultural engineering school. On February 27, 2001, she moved to Caracas, the capital of Venezuela, to pursue a degree in veterinary medicine. However, no one, including Linda and her family, could have predicted the unexpected turn her life would take. On the morning of March 27, 2001, she was kidnapped by Luis Carrera Almoina. Luis's family was one of the most prominent intellectual and political families in Venezuela. He is the second son of Gustavo Carrera, a renowned researcher, writer, and university professor who was a member of the Venezuelan Language Institute and a former rector of the National Open University. Luis's uncle is a notable intellectual and academic figure in Venezuela. His family is very influential, with many members involved in the Communist Party of Venezuela. Luis's mother, who died in 2000, was also a talented researcher, writer, and professor at the Faculty of Humanities and Education at the Central University of Venezuela. Luis's aunt, along with his sister, had close ties to the government during the Chavez era and were involved in promoting cultural ties linked to socialism. Luis is considered an agricultural engineer and rancher, and he is the son of a school principal from the upper class. However, in reality, he has no stable job or permanent residence. Instead, he relies on his father's financial support and reputation. As a young man, Luis attended a private high school in a wealthy area of eastern Caracas and spent some time living in France. Those who knew him often described him as sociable and self-promoting. On March 27, Luis, then 36, kidnapped 18-year-old Linda at gunpoint. The next morning, Ana Cecilia Lopez noticed that her sister had not returned home. The sisters lived together and were both planning to move to the capital for college. Concerned, Ana reported Linda's disappearance to the police, but they told her it was too early to start looking for her. Shortly thereafter, a stranger called Ana and said her sister would not be returning. When Ana tried to call back, she reached an answering machine. It turned out that Luis, the kidnapper, had made the call. Ana went to the police at least 6 times, but they did not file a complaint or take any action. Instead, they reassured her that Linda and Luis were likely in a romantic relationship and that it was best not to interfere. Occasionally called Ana to reassure her that Linda was fine and studying to pursue a modeling career. However, 2 months after the kidnapping, on May 26, 2001, Ana reported the incident to the police, who began an investigation. The police attempted to contact the owner of the phone number associated with the case and left several messages urging him to voluntarily turn himself in. One morning in March, just weeks after arriving in Caracas, Linda left the building where she lived. She was carrying a thesis and some documents to submit to the Ministry of Education. The building, located at the end of a dead-end street, also contained a small bookstore, a bakery, and a hardware store. As she stepped outside, Luis approached her from behind, threatened her with a weapon, and dragged her into a burgundy-colored van. After putting Linda in the car, he drove to a hotel near the location where she was kidnapped. Linda was terrified immediately after the incident. He was much taller and stronger than she was, looked well-groomed, but acted aggressively and threatened her with a weapon throughout the trip. He warned her that any attempt to resist would result in her death. He arrived at a hotel. Before parking, he repeated that he would kill her if she screamed. He then put the weapon in his jacket pocket. When he checked in, the room he had booked was not ready, and he was told to wait for about an hour. Since the wait was taking too long, he decided to take Linda back to the car and drive to his father's apartment. Before going out into the street, he threatened Linda again. This time, he put his arm around her and walked with her from the parking lot. They passed 2 houses where everyone knew Luis, and he stopped to say hello and chat for a while. He told the women that Linda was his girlfriend. He made up a story that Linda had decided to move in with him, but she cried because she felt guilty about leaving her family. When they arrived at the apartment, he calmed down a bit and started packing various things into a black bag that he had prepared earlier. When he was done packing, they went back to the hotel to check in. After checking into the hotel, Luis quickly inspected the room, looking at the doors, windows, curtains, and bathroom. Meanwhile, Linda noticed a door leading to the next room and considered using it to escape. However, Luis sensed her intentions and asked the hotel staff to change rooms. They were quickly moved to another room. Luis meticulously planned his actions. Inside the room, he made sure the security chains were fastened, the locks were secure, the TV was blaring loudly to drown out Linda's screams, the curtains were drawn tight, and he kept a weapon ready to intimidate her into submission. Linda later described her first night of captivity as terrifying and hopeless. For 112 days, Linda endured severe psychological, verbal, and physical abuse. The ordeal began in a hotel and continued in an apartment in eastern Caracas. Every day, Luis treated Linda like a slave, subjecting her to relentless abuse. On July 19, 2001, Luis left the apartment and forgot to handcuff Linda. She managed to use her remaining strength to reach the window and scream for help. Firefighters finally arrived and climbed onto the balcony to rescue her. When they entered the apartment, they witnessed a heartbreaking scene. The place was covered in trash, and Linda weighed only 32 kilos. Although she was rescued, the memory of that moment still makes her extremely sad. Linda was severely injured, with bruises and broken bones in many places on her body. Her face and mouth were disfigured due to the abuse. Luis forced her to take drugs, gave her very little food, and kept her in poor living conditions. On the day of her rescue, there was a 5-hour delay between the arrival of the fire department and the time she was taken to the doctor. Linda's health was so critical that she could have died at any moment. During her captivity, her life was constantly in danger. After her rescue, she underwent 15 complex surgeries and was hospitalized for more than a year. Shocking photos of her condition appeared on the front pages of newspapers, highlighting the brutality of her situation. The community saw Luis as a monstrous figure and the embodiment of evil. However, Linda's real struggle was only just beginning. After enduring the abuse, she now faced another challenge: Luis's punishment. In an interview, Linda expressed that although her body bore many scars, the deepest pain was in her heart. This trauma is not only hers, but also symbolizes the pain of all women who have suffered abuse from men who have gone unpunished. Linda was probably not Luis's first or last victim. Although she escaped, his life remained unchanged, as the police did not take action against him. Determined to seek justice, Linda chose to pursue a career in law. She earned a law degree and a master's degree in human rights. She repeatedly pointed out that Luis's socioeconomic status had a significant impact on both the investigation and the court's decisions. While Linda was in custody, Luis repeatedly told her that his father's status and connections would protect him from punishment. Her family noted that in Linda's case, basic procedures such as taking photos of the crime scene, collecting evidence, and conducting a forensic examination were not carried out until 8 days later. These essential steps were initially overlooked. There was also the issue of her numerous health problems not being properly documented, along with other important details being omitted. All of this clearly worked against Linda and in favor of Luis. During a trial, Luis underwent a test to determine if he had any psychological or emotional disorders that could explain his behavior and actions. The test showed that Luis did not exhibit any signs of mental illness. In October 2004, Luis was tried for causing serious injury and false imprisonment, with the possibility of attempted murder still being considered. The defense argued that Linda was promiscuous and had consented to most of Luis's actions. The judge then dismissed all charges against Luis Carrera Almoina. Linda felt she had no choice but to appeal to international judges. As a result, her case was heard by over 90 judges and dozens of prosecutors, but justice was still not served. In 2007, Linda appealed to the United States Commission on Human Rights. In the following years, the commission held approximately 3 hearings related to her case. In 2015, the commission's chairman allowed Linda to speak for 10 minutes. In her testimony, Linda recounted the horrors she endured at the hands of Luis and how she tried to call for help from those nearby. She also described the moment she was rescued and reflected on her long struggle for justice. Linda's representative urged the United States Commission on Human Rights to thoroughly evaluate the case, highlighting the flaws in the investigation. The commission recommended that Venezuela conduct a comprehensive and timely investigation into the violence involving Linda. in accordance with the procedures outlined by the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. Furthermore, the Commission recommended that the state take appropriate disciplinary and criminal action against public officials whose actions or inactions resulted in a failure to deliver justice. The final recommendation was to examine the systems in Venezuela that could prevent a recurrence of past events, focusing on measures to ensure that women victims have access to justice. A national policy to prevent violence against women began to take shape, with effective monitoring and control mechanisms. In 2018, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights condemned the Venezuelan government for numerous human rights violations against Linda and her family. The state has not complied with the U.S. court ruling. Linda has been persistent in her efforts to ensure that regulations protecting women, girls, and adolescents are enforced. She has vowed to continue fighting until the state meets her demands. Linda was kidnapped for 112 days by Luis, a member of a prominent Venezuelan family, who remains at large and unidentified. Linda often emphasizes her age at the time of her kidnapping, as if trying to stress that she was too young to have endured such trauma. Even after more than 20 years, she remains committed to her fight. Linda seeks justice not only for herself, but for all women who have suffered violence. Through her activism, she aims to ensure that no one else has to endure the nightmare she experienced.